Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Good morning. In the name of Allah, most merciful, most compassionate, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you.
I'm Ali Al-Nubi from the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation. We would like to welcome you to our workshop on countering the financing of terrorism, investigations, and new technologies, which is conducted in collaboration with the United Nations Office for Counterterrorism. On behalf of the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation, we thank you for your presence and attendance today. We would like to also extend our gratitude to the UNOCT and the experts for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us for the next 2 days. The workshop will be conducted over the course of 2 days, both virtually and physically. And the agenda can be viewed by scanning the barcode available on the table in front of you and on your screen. Upon the completion of the workshop, participation certificates will be shared with all attendees. We would like to bring to your attention that the workshop will be conducted in both Arabic and English languages. The esteemed guests present physically with us today can make use of the available headsets provided to access your required translation. Dear guests attending virtually, kindly set your preferred language from the interpretation options available on your screens. However, please be sure to pause the video before moving to your required translation page. حضورنا الكرام ستقدم ورشة عمل
As just explained in Arabic, the workshop will be held in both English and Arabic. Translation is available through the headsets available on the tables here, and our guests online may choose the language that they want at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you pause the video before you move to the required language.
Start our workshop by welcoming the Director of the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation, His Excellency Talal Al-Taneji, for his opening speech. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Excellence Miss France Lemeunier, head of the section on counter-terrorism financing at the United Nations. Excellency Hamid Zahabi, Director General of the AML-CFT Executive Office. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you. It is my honor to meet you here today. I would like to welcome you present here today and welcome the participants online. We have more than 3,500 participants with us today. So I would like to welcome you all, especially those coming from abroad, and I hope you will have a good stay in Dubai. I would like to thank you for coming to participate to this workshop on counterterrorism financing, investigations, techniques, and modern techniques, and investigations and new technologies, sorry. We are here among a group of experts, and this will allow us to have the opportunity to get to know the new methods adopted for criminals to evade sanctions and to collect funds to support terrorism. We will also learn how we can overcome the challenges that law enforcement authorities and the private sectors face in order to uncover or detect terrorism financing, especially the use of new technologies like virtual assets. Ladies and gentlemen, this workshop comes within a series of workshops whereby we aim to raise awareness of all our national partners from the government and the private sector in order to abide by international requirements and standards, namely UN Security Council resolutions and standards on counterterrorism and the effective implementation of targeted financial sanctions, the identification of typologies and methods used for the financing of terrorism. I would like to thank the Center for or the UNCCT for their assistance in the implementation of our training plan. The United Arab Emirates aimed during the past few years to establish the necessary legal framework in order to implement international requirements in terms of counterterrorism financing and TFS, and that through the implementation of a national list that includes the names of individuals and organizations and entities, and sharing such lists with the private and public sectors in order to identify assets of terrorists and freeze such assets while notifying the competent authorities to guarantee the protection of our banking and finance sector from these illegitimate funds and from the financing of terrorism. In addition to that, we have issued a number of laws that are in line with the UN Security Council resolutions and the FATF standards, especially when it comes to recommendations 6 and 7. We can name here Federal Law number 20 of 2018 on combating money laundering and counterterrorism financing and the financing of illegitimate organizations. This law has set the necessary legal framework for the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions related to terrorism and terrorism financing. After this law, Cabinet Decision number 20 of 2019 was issued and then was later updated in 2020 with Cabinet Resolution number 74 on terrorism lists and the implementation of UN SCRs related to terrorism financing, proliferation and proliferation financing. This decision has established the role of the EOCN as a national entity in charge of the follow-up on the implementation of UN SCRs, in addition to identifying the roles of other entities in the immediate freezing of funds when they are related to listed individuals on the national list or on the UN sanctions list. From the more operational side, the EOCN has issued a number of guidance manuals to assist the government and private sector in the implementation of targeted financial sanctions, to identify red flags and typologies used by terrorism financiers to conceal their operations. The EOCN also aimed to build capacities and awareness and ensure that all entities are aware of the latest developments in terrorism financing and counterterrorism financing. This year only, we have trained more than 20,000 participants from both the private and the public sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, national cooperation is a main pillar today, and the sharing of financial intelligence is also a pillar in order to combat these crimes. Public-private partnership is also a solution to face these terrorist financiers. We would like to seize the opportunity of having you here today. Welcome once again to the UAE. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your sincere statement. We would like to now welcome Ms. France Luminaire from the UNOCT for her opening statement. Welcome.
Excellency, Mr. Talal Al-Taneji, Excellency, Mr. Hamid Al-Zubi, dear participants, dear speakers, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to this joint workshop on countering the financing of terrorism, investigations, and new technologies, an event that is co-organized by the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, its Counterterrorism Center, together with the United Arab Emirates. My most sincere gratitude and highest appreciation goes to the government of the UAE and the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation for convening, organizing, and hosting this workshop, and to the EO of AML CFT for its strong support and future partnership. Let me convey a warm welcome to all participants, speakers, and experts, and extend my thanks to the government of Korea and Egypt for sharing expertise and good practices with us. My gratitude goes also to my dear colleagues from the Counterterrorism Committee Executive Directorate and UNODC for supporting this event, and to the many entities from the UAE, and especially also the Executive Office for AML, CFT, and EOCN, as well as the private sector. This workshop marks another key milestone in our ongoing engagement with EOCN, and I'm extremely proud of the strategic partnership between my office and the UAE on countering the financing of terrorism. Some words about us. We are part of the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism. This office has been mandated to lead and coordinate an all-of-UN approach to address terrorism. The United Nations Counterterrorism Center serves as a facilitator for providing integrated technical assistance to member states to enhance their capacity to address the threats and to ensure the coherent implementation of the global counterterrorism strategy. Countering the financing of terrorism is one of the most crucial components of the global fight against terrorism. By unanimously adopting Resolution 2462 in 2019, the Security Council reiterated its call to member states and the wider international community to strengthen their efforts on the financing of terrorism, including by apprehending the new and emerging technologies that can be misused for terrorist financing purposes. In response to these important resolutions of the Security Council, the UN Counterterrorism Center established the Global Coordinated Program on Detecting, Preventing, and Countering the Financing of Terrorism in 2020. The core pillars of this program are designed to address the evolving nature of the terrorist financing threats, while upholding human rights and building multidimensional partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, information and communication technologies such as internet, social media, new payment technologies and fundraising methods, payment platforms, social media crowdfunding, or virtual assets. The potential role that new technologies can play in terrorist financing has been a growing preoccupation worldwide for a decade. With their focus on speed, cost, and efficiency, new and emerging technologies not only have the potential to make life easier for ordinary people, but they can also create opportunities for criminals and for evading sanctions. Reflecting these preoccupations last year, the special meeting of the UN Counterterrorism Committee resulted in the adoption of the Delhi Declaration on countering the use of new and emerging technologies for terrorist purposes, to be declined into a set of non-binding principles for helping member states navigating into the different requirements established at UN international or FATF level in this regard. It is key to note that the Delhi Declaration does also emphasize on the need to preserve global connectivity and the free and secure flow of information, facilitating economic development, communication, participation, and access to information. Our workshop over the next 2 days is aimed at considering 4 main questions. First, what are the emerging vulnerabilities and threats of virtual assets and other new technologies from terrorist financing angle? Second, What are public and private sectors entities doing to address those vulnerabilities and threats? And how to enhance capacity to effectively detect and disrupt the abuse of new technologies for terrorist financing purposes? Third, how can technology support CFT efforts? And lastly, how to develop an inclusive approach to assess the risk, adopt risk-based mitigating measures, and address future challenges. All presenters in this event have accumulated first-hand experience on countering the use of new technologies and cryptocurrencies. And it is my wish that we will all learn and build on that knowledge and share our respective expertise. And I want, in this regard, to comment on the many achievements made recently by the UAE in this regard, as well as praising the country's leading role in technological developments. Today's event represents a continuation of my office commitments to build human and technological capacity to close loopholes exploited by terrorists. It also marks a clear contribution to foster our efforts in addressing the evolving intersection between digital technologies and terrorism without prejudicing innovation and technological evolution for licit purposes and with due consideration for human rights. We should be reminded that while we have achieved substantial progress in developing and implementing mechanisms to counter terrorist financing, our continuous efforts to adopt innovative solutions to address those evolving threats remains our priority. Ladies and gentlemen, only through active collaboration and targeted effort we will be able to achieve concrete results. This event is another clear example of such commitments, and with these remarks, I wish you all a fruitful and engaging event, and I thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. France, for your statement. We would like to now welcome Ms. Nicole El-Khouri from UN Counterterrorism Committee, Executive Directorate, for her opening statement. Welcome.
سعادة السيد طلال
Excellency طلال التناجي, Excellency حامد الزعابي, Excellency France Le Meunier, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my pleasure to be back in Dubai after such a long while. On behalf of my colleague Svetlana Martinova and on behalf of myself, I would like to thank the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation for the organization of this event and for inviting the UNCTAD to be part of this event. I would also like to thank the UNOCT for the coordination with the UNCTAD for the preparation of this event and to facilitate the participation of the UNCTAD and for our ongoing constructive cooperation. Monitoring and detecting the compliance with UN Security Council resolutions is part of the core mandate of the UNCTAD since its establishment in 2001. This is a main axis of the work of the CTAD. In its assessments under UN Security Council Resolution 1373 of 2001 and the International Treaty for the for countering terrorism financing of 1999, the UNCTAD focuses in its requirements on the criminalization of TF, prosecution of TF, effective freezing mechanism, risk assessment of TF, and also the deterring the misuse of NPOs and Hawala systems for terrorism financing. Since 2014, member countries were required to take measures to disrupt the terrorism financing activities related to foreign terrorist fighters. According to these decisions, member states must also detect and deter links between organized crime, transnational organized crime, and illicit activity and terrorism financing. In 2019, Resolution 2462 was issued by the Security Council, and it is the first decision that is exclusively specialized in combating terrorism financing, and it has established a number of sectors or high priority sectors related to terrorism financing. In addition to these main requirements of this resolution, including risk assessment of TF and integration of financial intelligence in efforts to combat terrorism and the effective use of national mechanisms for freezing, the CTAD was also mandated with supporting member states in their work related to the impact of terrorism, of combating terrorism on the reach of humanitarian aid. Also, in line with this decision or resolution, the CTAD gave greater importance to risks of terrorism financing related to new technologies, and that is the topic of our workshop today, including mobile payments, virtual assets, online payment systems, and crowdfunding platforms. In this regard, the CTAD works closely with the FATF and its international network. After the adoption of the Delhi Declaration, that was the final statements of a special meeting of the CTC that was organized in Mumbai and New Delhi last year, which focused on new and emerging technologies and their use for terrorism financing, the UNCTAD has adopted a number of non-binding guiding principles in order to detect and combat the use of modern technology for terrorism financing purposes. And we will be sharing these principles with you once they are approved by the CTC. Based on its mandate, the CTAD, and on behalf of the CTC, conducted two assessment visits to the UAE in 2011 and 2017. These visits identified challenges faced by the national local authorities and how they can combat terrorism activity. And since then, we've been closely cooperating with the UAE competent authorities to remain updated on emerging challenges and steps taken in the UAE in terms of counter-terrorism, especially that the UAE is currently the president of the CTC. Technological advances have always been a power for change in our societies and economies and government systems. However, the speed of these new developments and absorbing these developments by people around the world is unprecedented. And as the UN Security Council said, innovations in financial technology may provide great financial opportunities opportunities. However, there is a risk that they may be misused, including for terrorism purposes, such as helping terrorists operate, especially in collecting funds and evading detection. Our meeting here today is a very important opportunity to see how we can combat terrorism in light of this intensive use of new technologies, and what are the measures taken by the international community to face these threats. Thank you very much once again for hosting us in the beautiful city of Dubai, and we wish you fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Shukran, and
Thank you very much, Ms. Nicole.
Shop with our first session, TFPF, Red Flags, Typologies, and Virtual Assets Risk Assessment. The session will be presented by Mr. Hamad Al-Kaabi from the Executive Office for AML-CTF and Mr. Mohammed Darwish from the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation. Mr. Hamad, we welcome you to the stage to start the session.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. May the peace of Allah be upon you.
An honor and pleasure to be one of the participants and presenter at your respected events today. My name is Hamad Al-Kaabi. I am Risk and Policies Specialist at the Executive Office of Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing. If you allow me today, I'd like to present our latest risk assessment regarding virtual assets and virtual asset service provider that was conducted back in 21. And I'll be gladly to walk you through it and through our AML-CFT framework updates regarding the virtual assets and virtual assets service provider. I'd like to start with our degree, amendment degree, number 20, 2018, which defines the virtual assets and the virtual asset service provider. If you allow me, I'd like to read it through. The virtual assets is a digital representation of the value that can be negotiated digitally or transferred, which can be used for the purpose of payment, investments, of other purposes, or specified in the implementation regulations of this degree by law. The virtual asset service provider, any natural or corporate person who carries on as a commercial business one or more of the activities of virtual assets defined by the implementation regulations of this degree by law, or the operation relating to them in favor or on behalf of nature or other corporate persons. The obligations on supervisions regarding FIs and DNFPPs as well, businesses and customers risk assessments, supervision and inspections, KYC and CCD, as well reporting suspicious transaction. Yes. So back in 21, the UAE has conducted its first virtual assets and virtual asset service provider risk assessment. The process was designed to produce the first comprehensive assessment of illicit finance risk posed to the UAE by virtual assets and virtual asset service providers. The objectives of this risk assessment was first to determine the scope of virtual asset service providers' operations in the country, gather information on the use of virtual assets in the country and illicit actors who may seek to use the jurisdiction, understand the UAE's legal and regulatory framework as it relates to virtual assets and virtual asset service provider. Virtual assets to transfer or store the value through or in the UAE, assess the UAE illicit finance risk related to virtual assets and virtual asset service provider. We conducted the 21 virtual assets and virtual asset service provider for 14 weeks. We conducted 50 interviews, including 14 public sectors and 16 private institutions. We came up with 5 key findings. I'd like to start with our risk understanding, the effectiveness of the various law enforcement entities at our country with a role in combating money laundering and terrorism financing, the regulatory and supervisory framework to identify the vulnerabilities of our regimes related to virtual assets and virtual asset service provider, and identify and assess the efficiency of the measures that the UAE's supervisors and financial institutions have undertaken to further mitigate relevant threats and vulnerabilities and reduce the risk as well. We have identified the threats. Our authorities generally agree that the fraud back in 21 risk assessment is the predicted offense most likely to be involved in money laundering involving virtual assets and virtual asset service providers. The virtual asset service providers in many jurisdictions are subjected to little or no regulatory oversight or effective regulatory oversight provides additional vulnerabilities that illicit financial actors can exploit. All cases provided by our legal enforcement authority detailed fraud schemes in which false statements regarding virtual assets were used to attract victims. Authorities have not observed case in which illicit actors used virtual assets to launder the proceeds of a separate predicate offense, whether fraud or another proceeds generally. Back in 21 risk assessment, we came up with 5 major recommendations, starting with effectively and consistently identify investigations and prosecute and license virtual asset service provider activity throughout the country. Increase the understanding of virtual assets and virtual asset service providers risk among public authorities and the private sector as well. Establish an appropriate virtual asset service provider, regulatory and licensing regime, and clearly delineate regulatory rounders for virtual assets and virtual asset service provider, increase investigations and prosecutions of money laundering involving virtual assets, and lastly, improve the understanding of and response of the potential terrorism financing threats involving virtual assets and virtual asset service provider. Our next step, which we have already started working on, and our authorities, as I'll show you later on, have started in 5 of these steps. The first one, enhance the public sector training and private sector awareness. We have started doing that back in 21 until today. The last one we have conducted was a month ago. It was for all public authorities, and we make one day for private authorities as well. Continue domestic and international cooperation to tackle virtual assets risk. Our executive office of AML CFT has already started updating the virtual assets and virtual asset supervisory, virtual assets and virtual assets providers risk assessment. We have already started that, and we will be finalizing at the end of this year. The following 5 next steps, our respected 5 virtual assets and virtual asset service provider have already started working on it. The first one is passed or enacted registration regulations requiring VASPs to be registered, licensed, and apply AML CFT measures. Registered or licensed any VASP, any practice. As an example of that, VARA has already started with their grandfathering program, which was started a year ago, to register the unlicensed VASP. Conduct any supervisory inspections, including virtual assets service provider in the current inspection plan. Taken any enforcement action or other supervisory actions against virtual asset service provider, and finally passed or enacted the travel rule for virtual asset service provider. Thank you all.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. May the peace of Allah be upon you.
Pleasure to be among the speakers here today. My name is Mohammed Darwish. I'm the section head of research and policies at the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation. Today, my presentation is going to focus mainly on virtual assets, terrorist financing and proliferation financing red flags and typologies. Although I would like to point out the title of our workshop today is Investigations and New Technologies, but what's interesting to note is that Bitcoin was actually created in 2009. So it's already been around 14 years since Bitcoin has been around, but what's new in Bitcoin and blockchain in general is that each year we're seeing a new trend, a new technology appear within the space. So to give you an example, about 3 or 4 years ago, we saw the decentralized finance trend really appear. Recently, we're seeing also other types of trends appear in the space, like the metaverse, the AI, the Telegram bots, and so on. So because this field is really emerging with new technologies, it's important to always keep an eye out on it. So let me just take the pointer. So let's begin by defining virtual assets. So my colleague Hamad, in his presentation, he gave an overview on how the UAE law defines virtual assets. So we can see it's very similar, or it's actually kind of the same as how the FATF defines virtual assets. So the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, defines virtual assets as a digital representation of value that can be digitally traded or transferred. And it can be used both for payment or for investment purposes. However, the FATF makes a clear distinction, and the definition is that digital representations of fiat currencies and securities is not considered as part of the virtual asset definition. So to give you an example, today, almost everything is digital. You open your mobile application, you go to your bank application, and you just send money to someone. Something happens among the banks and the amount is deducted from your account. So that's also considered digital, but when we're talking about virtual assets specifically, we're excluding that part of it, which is related to fiat and security. So that leaves us with really a practical definition of when we say virtual assets, we really mean cryptocurrencies mainly. Now, we've explained what is meant by virtual assets. Now, what do we mean by virtual asset service provider? So the FATF has also recently updated its recommendations, In addition to financial institutions and designated non-financial businesses and professions, now virtual asset service providers are also required to implement the AML CTF recommendations that the FATF requires. So if your company is conducting any of these activities, it is essentially considered a virtual asset service provider. So what are those activities? If you conduct any services that allow for exchange between virtual assets and fiat currencies, so if you provide services to exchange Bitcoin to dollars or Bitcoin to dirhams, then you're a virtual asset service provider, or a VASP. We will use the acronym VASP going forward. If you allow exchange between one or more forms of virtual assets, so you're exchanging your Bitcoin to Ethereum or your Bitcoin to Ripple, that's also considered among the VASP services. If you allow transfer of virtual assets, so if you're an exchange and you allow someone to transfer their virtual assets to a private wallet or to another exchange, that's also among the VASP activities. Safekeeping and or administration of virtual assets. So if you're holding virtual assets on behalf of someone, which is sometimes referred to as custody as well, so that's also considered a VASP activity. And last but not least, participation in and provision of financial services related to an issuer's offer and or sale of a virtual asset. Here, maybe a lot of you have heard of the ICO craze, they call it. It happened back in 2017, where a lot of these virtual asset companies were issuing their tokens similar to how a company would issue their stocks, what's called an IPO. This is called an ICO, or initial coin offering. So if you participate in any of those services, you are also considered a VASP. I would argue here that another service that may fall within this is providing cryptocurrency or Bitcoin exchange traded funds, ETFs. So this has been a trend recently where a lot of companies have been trying to get approvals to manage those Bitcoin ETFs. BlackRock has recently filed one with the US SEC. So I would actually argue that also those kind of services may fall under the VASP definition. Now let's look at virtual asset features. So we call them features here, but I would like you to think of it also as vulnerabilities. These features kind of act as vulnerabilities when we're using virtual assets. So first of all, the ability to transact across borders rapidly. This is a feature of virtual assets. So today, basically, I can send my Bitcoin to someone in America or Australia, and it can reach him within 10 to 15 minutes. This is really a breakthrough innovation, but it also acts as a vulnerability. When I talk about vulnerability, I mean in terms of AML, CTF, and how it can be misused there. Potential for greater anonymity. So when we talk about anonymity, again, in 2009, when Bitcoin was created, it was created by a guy who's known as Satoshi Nakamoto, and till now we don't know who this guy is. So even the owner or the creator of Bitcoin is anonymous. And there are services that actually provide, we'll talk about it more in the next slides, but what's called as mixers or tumblers. What they basically do is they combine transactions from the originators, multiple originators, they pool them together, and then they send it to the recipient. So essentially you don't know which transaction from the originator went to which recipient in essence. So this is the anonymity part that we're talking about, and is really a vulnerability and a risk. Potential for decentralization and fragmentation of near instant global services. So again, I mentioned in the beginning the decentralized finance trend that appeared 4 years ago. So normally when you want to take a loan, you can go to a bank, the bank gives you a loan, the bank does its KYC CDD. But with decentralized finance, the idea is you can borrow from anyone on the internet using these services, and anyone can lend to you. So this is really what we mean when we say potential for decentralization. So previously, borrowing, lending was only done through the bank. Now it can be done person to person using these DeFi services, which again poses a risk. Uneven application of AML CTF measures. So because a lot of countries deal with this space differently, some have banned cryptocurrencies, some have started to regulate it, so that always poses for arbitrage opportunities. Last but not least is non-face-to-face activities. So basically, for those of you who have opened or tried to open an account with a cryptocurrency exchange, there is no brick and mortar store that you can go to actually open that account. Everything is done online, so there is no face-to-face interaction. And you may have gone through what I call the mugshot, which is where you hold a paper, you write the date and your name, and you have one of your friends take a picture of you, and then you send it to the exchange in order to get your KYC CDD approved. Although these are very welcome and very good KYC CDD measures, but again, the non-face-to-face nature of these transactions always increases the level of risk and vulnerability. So now we've explained virtual assets, VASPs, and their features. We will go on to talk more about the red flags, specifically in terms of TF and PF. I would like to first focus on a guideline that the Executive Office for Control and Non-Proliferation has recently issued in September. This is a more general guideline that has TF and PF red flags, some of which are related to virtual assets. So the purpose of this guideline was to consolidate all the TF and PF red flags into one document. And I would like to note here as a disclaimer, this guideline contains a consolidated list, but not a comprehensive list. So what that means is that there are always new red flags that are emerging, and we update this document as and when required. So within the PF red flags, we've actually classified it into customer profile, account and transactions, maritime sector, and trade finance. We will go through these. So the first red flag is with regards to proliferation financing is if a transaction involves an entity or person in a foreign country of proliferation concern. Usually PF transactions involve possible shell companies, so elements of shell companies are normally, for example, if they are registered in an address that is normally not, when you go check on that address, you would normally find that it's in a high residential building or in a place where a lot of these shell companies register. Complex legal entities or arrangements that seem to be aiming to hide the beneficial owner, final destination, or end user. So with PF networks, a common red flag is, or a common typology is that they would use complex legal structures. And when they do the actual shipment, they might state the freight forwarder as the end user, which is in most cases not the case because the freight forwarder will then forward that shipment onto the end user. So here it's important to do the due diligence to identify the actual end user. Identifying documents that seem to be forged or counterfeited, and I would add here also inconsistencies in trade finance documents. So normally with PF, you would find that there are inconsistencies in trade finance documents. So for example, if you compare the bill of lading with the sales agreement, you would find that the amount of goods that is being sold is not in line with the amount of goods that's being shipped. Or if you compare, for example, the invoice with the custom declaration form, if you find inconsistencies there, it means that there is a red flag, a possible red flag for PF. Dealing with dual-use goods or controlled goods, and I would like to actually qualify this statement without the proper permits. So dealing with dual-use goods or controlled goods is not prohibited, but if your client is dealing with them without having the proper permits from the authorities, and when you ask him to get the permit, you find that he is hesitating to go and get the permit, he's trying to avoid the question, then that also might be a red flag. It's important to note that one red flag may not mean that the transaction is suspicious. But depending on the case and the context of the case, you may find that the presence of multiple red flags may be a reason for you to actually raise a suspicious transaction or activity report to the Financial Intelligence Unit. With regards to terrorism financing related red flags, normally these are linked with multiple ATM cash withdrawals that occur in short succession in the border of sanctioned countries or countries where terrorist groups are known to operate. So that's one red flag. A second one is if funds are sent or received via international transfers from or to high-risk locations. So if these transfers are large in volume, they're being made frequently to such jurisdictions, it may be a cause of a red flag. And when we say higher risk jurisdiction, so the National AML CTF Committee in the UAE has published that list on its website, and it's basically the FATF list of high risk jurisdictions. Excuse me. NPOs have been known to be misused for terrorism financing, so you should always do the due diligence on NPO clients to make sure that they are actually providing the funds and using the funds as they are stated to. And a red flag would be multiple personal and business accounts of NPOs that are used to raise funds. So if the funds that are being raised are not in line with the nature of the NPO, or for example, an NPO, normally what you would see is if one NPO is raising much more than what you would expect it to raise, then that is also a cause for concern. Here we come to some more red flags that are more specific to virtual assets. So, and this is specific to VASPs. Sending virtual assets to unregulated virtual asset exchanges or receiving them from unregulated exchanges, that's also a red flag. The Central Bank of the UAE and Supervisory Subcommittee have actually recently published a guideline on this, how to identify unregulated VASPs and how to deal with them. So I'd encourage everyone to look at that guideline. And then you have a transfer of funds to a virtual asset exchange's bank account, followed by the crypto to fiat conversion from the same exchange within a relatively short period of time. So here what would happen is, for example, I would send fiat to a virtual asset exchange operator's bank account. I would receive my USD on the exchange's trading account. I would use that money to buy Bitcoin, and then I would immediately send it to another exchange to sell the Bitcoin. Now that I've talked about the guideline that was issued by the EOCN, I would like to move to talk more specifically about red flags that are related to virtual asset and virtual asset service providers. So the FATF has issued a virtual assets red flags indicator guideline in September 2020, and it classified the red flags into 7 categories. One is related to anonymity, geographical risks, transaction patterns, transaction size, the sender's or recipient's profile, and the sources of funds or wealth. So in relation to anonymity, there are multiple red flags related to anonymity, and the most obvious ones, I would like to avoid reading through the list. You can read it, but I'd like to summarize what's mentioned on this list is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, the use of mixing and tumbling services to hide the recipient or originator of the transaction. So we mentioned that these services, what they do is they would pool a bunch of transactions together in order to avoid identifying the which transaction is going to which recipient. So this, as you can see, is number 3. Another red flag is a large number of seemingly unrelated VA wallets that are controlled from the same IP address. This may indicate the use of shell wallets registered to different users. So in this case, a group or a network may be colluding together in order to raise funds. So what they would do is they would set up multiple VA wallets. But a red flag would be if they use the same IP address, that would give a red flag indicator. And especially if they've set up the wallets during the same time frame, that would also give a red flag. When we talk about geographical risks, this again comes back to when we said dealing with unregulated VASPs. It also links back to VASPs that operate in jurisdictions with weak AML or CTF laws. So there are multiple jurisdictions that have not yet enacted laws regarding VASP, especially when it comes to AML CDD requirements. So if you as a VASP are receiving funds from other VASP that are located in such jurisdictions. It's not meant to say that this in itself is suspicious, but this is one of the red flags. If it is supplemented by other red flags, it may add to the suspicion. Another red flag is that the customer's funds originated from or are sent to an exchange that is not registered in the jurisdiction where the customer is located. So if I open a VASP account in the UAE and I send it to an exchange that's operating outside the UAE, then it may be a red flag, because if there are VASP operators in the UAE and I can use them to trade or buy or sell, if there is no logical business reason for me to send those VASPs abroad, then that would be a red flag indicator. So it's always a matter of using judgment and combining these red flags with other red flag indicators. So we move on to transaction patterns related red flags. So the FATF guideline has split these into two. So transaction patterns concerning new users and concerning all users or already existing users. So with relation to new users, conducting a large initial deposit to open a new relationship with a VASP while the amount is funded is inconsistent with the customer profile. So since VASPs are now required to do the CDD KYC, if they see that a new customer has recently opened an account and he's, I don't know, deposited 100 million dirhams suddenly into that account, obviously they will ask what is the source of this wealth. So if the customer is unable to provide a proper documentation or reasoning for this source, then that's a red flag. A new user attempts to trade the entire balance of VAs or withdraws the VAs and attempts to send the entire balance of the platform. This is another red flag concerning new users. Now, when we're talking about other users, if someone tries to use multiple VA accounts or tries to open multiple accounts with no logical business explanation, this is a red flag. And incoming transactions from many unrelated wallets in relatively small amounts and accumulation of funds with subsequent transfer to another wallet or full exchange for fiat currencies. So in this case, a person would be receiving multiple transactions during a limited time frame from multiple wallets, and he would then send them to another wallet. It could be a private wallet, it could be another exchange, in order to exchange it for fiat. It's worth mentioning that not all exchanges provide the service of converting to fiat. So also that needs to be taken into consideration, especially depending on which jurisdiction the customer is involved in. So if a customer opens an account in a VASP that provides the service to convert to fiat, that VASP needs to be mindful of such accounts where an account is opened, a large amount is deposited, and then converted into fiat without any prior activity taking place in the account. When it comes to transaction size, so structuring transaction in smaller amounts, which is normally under record keeping or reporting threshold, is or could be a red flag. So similar to how cash transactions are structured in money laundering, where they would deposit under the 10,000 dirham threshold, or 10,000 dirham threshold. Sorry, it's $10,000, I believe. It's 55,000 dirham. So similar in VA transactions, if someone is, funding the account slowly with small amounts in order to avoid the alert of suddenly depositing a large amount, that could be a red flag. Making multiple high-value transactions. So if these high-value transactions are made in short succession, in a staggered and regular pattern, or to a newly created or previously inactive account, that's also a red flag related to VASP. When we're talking about senders or recipient profiles, the guideline that the FATF published has broken it down into 4 key parts. The first one is irregularities observed during account creation. So creating separate accounts under different names to circumvent restrictions on trading or withdrawal limits. So normally, virtual asset service providers would have a withdrawal limit. So if someone is creating accounts in multiple VASPs within the same jurisdiction, In order to bypass that withdrawal limit, so if I have 200,000 a month from VASP A and 200,000 in VASP B, I would create multiple accounts in all of these VASPs to withdraw 400,000. However, my actual limit per VASP is 200,000. So this is an irregularity that may indicate a red flag. Irregularity is observed during the CDD process. This we will see actually in one of the case studies that we will present, which is basically incomplete or insufficient KYC information provided by the customer, or more importantly, when a customer declines requests for KYC documents, or when you require proof of source of funds. In relation to profile, if a customer is known via publicly available information to law enforcement due to previous criminal association, that's obviously a red flag. Last but not least, a customer purchases large amounts of VAs that is not substantiated by any available wealth or consistent with his historic financial profile. This may be an indication of potential money mule or a scam artist that has scammed victims, and he's received a big amount of inflow of VASPs through that scam operation. He would then purchase large amounts of VAs using those amounts, but this is not consistent with his historic financial profile, so that would indicate that he's probably acting as a money mule or a scam victim. Last but not least, red flags related to source of funds or wealth. Again, if a customer's funds are sourced directly from these mixing and tumbling services, so we use mixers and tumblers interchangeably. Essentially, they mean the same thing, which is what I explained earlier. So if a customer funds his VA wallet using those services, that's a red flag on the source of funds. If a customer is source of wealth is disproportionately drawn from VAs originating from other VASP. So if he funds his wallet using other VASP or using a wallet in another VASP, especially if that VASP is unregulated or if that VASP is in a jurisdiction with weak AML CTF controls. VA transactions that originate from or destined to online gambling services. So now there are actually online gambling services that allow transactions in VASPs. Last but not least is deposits into an account or a VA address that are significantly higher than ordinary with an unknown source of funds, followed by conversion to fiat. I think we already touched upon this also earlier. Now coming to the last part of the presentation, I'll be presenting a couple of case studies. One is relating to TF and one is related to PF on how these technologies, specifically virtual assets, can be used in those cases. So when we're talking about crowdfunding with e-wallets or virtual assets wallets, this case study, basically you have person A who was operating a network. This network was made up of a number of individuals. These individuals set up separate virtual asset wallets, and they were collecting donations online through social media to actually fund those wallets. The cryptocurrency that was collected through the wallets was then sent to the VASP exchanges in order to convert it to fiat. Here we tried to simplify it, showing that it was sent to one VASP, but it could be actually sent to multiple VASPs in order to make the case more complex and non-traceable. So once it reaches the VASP, obviously a transaction has to happen between the VASP and the bank. So the fiat or the Bitcoin that was converted to fiat in the VASP, the fiat would then have to actually be converted through the bank account. So it would have to be sent to the bank account to be converted. And what would happen then is, in this particular case, they were withdrawing. Again, it could be multiple banks and multiple VAs to make the case more complex. They would actually use cash couriers to withdraw the fiat money from the bank accounts, and they would send that money back to person A. Person A would send the money to a terrorist group. So this is one typology on how VASPs or virtual assets can be used to fund terrorism financing. Here, what I would like to point out is the obligation of the banks and the VASPs to actually do their due diligence to identify the red flags that we talked about in the presentation. In relation to proliferation financing, I would like to point out this case study. It involves both proliferation financing and an aspect of money laundering as well. So this case involves the Lazarus Group. So this group is known through multiple international reports and news articles. It's known to support North Korea's nuclear program through conducting virtual asset hacks. So they've conducted a hack on South Korean exchange previously. So in this particular case, they basically conducted the hack on crypto wallets worth $100 million, or $100 million worth of crypto assets were stolen. They then used these two gentlemen who are acting as a front for the Lazarus Group, and they were actually helping the group to launder these funds. So the money was then sent to these two individuals. These two individuals opened account with multiple VASPs in order to convert the virtual assets into fiat. And they were actually using stolen or fake IDs in order to register with those VASPs. Now, the key thing I would like to point out in this case study is that one of the exchanges, known as VCE3, this exchange actually requested from these two gentlemen to conduct a video call to actually, as an additional due diligence measure, in order to identify, because they had suspected one of the ID documents, so they requested a video call from these two gentlemen to identify whether they were actually who they were saying they were, because they had stolen IDs. But they refused to do the video call. Regardless of that, the exchange went ahead and accepted the funds. So this was a shortfall in compliance on the part of the exchange. And in that way, the actual funds were laundered. But again, to tie this back to PF, because as I said, it contains both PF and money laundering, the tie would be here the Lazarus Group, which is known for supporting DPRK's proliferation activities. And they generally pose a higher risk in the virtual asset sector when it comes to PF. So the last slide, some recommendations for the private sector, especially VASPs, is to update the screening systems with latest red flags and indicators, and to always be aware of those red flags. Implement effective employee training programs to the different lines of defense. So when we say different lines of defense, normally we know that compliance, people working in compliance are well versed in these rules and regulations and red flags, but we also want to extend that training to the frontline personnel, people who are actually dealing with the customer, the relationship managers, the people who are actually opening the accounts for the clients. So they also need to be aware of these red flags. Last but not least is to report promptly any suspicious activities and transactions to the FIU when there is a reasonable ground for suspicion. Whether it was due to suspicion on AML, TF, or PF. Thank you all for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, presenters, for the discussion. I would like to welcome to the stage Ms. Suyon on her session, Law Enforcement and Investigations, Perspective on New Technologies.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Soyeon Jung from Korean National Police Agency in South Korea. First of all, thank you for having me here today, and thank you all for attending the workshop, and hope you have a meaningful time here learning a lot about the new technologies and its threats. This is the first time for me to visit UAE, Dubai, and I arrived yesterday after the 10-hour-long flight. And I was really surprised to see how beautiful and how fancy this country is. And I'm personally very excited to see the real desert, and especially the real camel for the first time in my life. Okay, I got the invitation letter for this workshop about a month ago, and I have been pretty busy preparing for all the stops for this business trip, and especially getting permissions from my office and my boss, of course. And I have spent a lot of time thinking about what message should I deliver for this 40-minute presentation. And I came to the conclusion that I should bring this up to you, the case study which involves phishing mail campaigns, hackings, and ransomware, as I believe this best fits this workshop agenda, as this case involves the government-supported hacking group and nationwide victims within South Korea and ransomware in connection with virtual assets. So, before I get into the presentation, I would like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Soyeon Jung, and I go by my English name, Jackie. I bet this is much easier for you to pronounce better than my Korean name. And I have written my contact, my email address, and phone number, and so that you can call me, text me, message me anytime if you need any support from Korean National Police and from myself. I graduated from Korean National Police University, major in law, and I'm currently working for my master's degree in computer science to enhance the capabilities of technology and to broaden my scope of view in a technical way. And so right after the graduation, I became a police officer in 2017, and after some field training courses, I became a cyber crime investigator, especially in the economic investigation division in a police office located in Seoul, the capital city of Korea. And that's the start of my career as an investigator in Korean National Police. And it has been about 6 years for now since I started to conduct investigation as a police officer. And most importantly, on January 2019, I moved to my current office, Cyber Terror Response Division in the headquarters office of Korean National Police. And since then, I have been working as a cybercrime investigator at the headquarters office. So I bet not many of you are familiar with the structure of the Korean National Police, so I'm going to briefly introduce where I work for. So there is a Commissioner General at the top, and there is National Office of Investigation, NOI, that's what we call. And that's the office which manages all the things and supervises all the things related to investigation of South Korean police. And under the Investigation Bureau, there are several bureaus under Investigation Bureaus, and there are the total of 3 specific divisions which works for the cyber crimes. And Cyber Response Division, Cyber Terror Response Division, where I work for, is one of them, and that is the only unit who conduct cyber crimes as a headquarters level. So most of the cases are handled by our colleagues and investigation teams, especially in the city level and the metropolitan level. And if the case involves the nationwide victims within South Korea, or if the case needs some special technical support, or if the case needs some wide range of international cooperations with the other foreign agency, then that kind of cases are handled by our unit in the headquarters office. So as a headquarters office unit, we typically investigate on the cyber crimes in relation to national security, especially the ones involving hacking, malware distribution, DDoS, or distributed denial of service attacks, ransomwares, and so on. So, so back to my introduction part. Since I started my work as a headquarter level investigator, I heavily worked on the ransomware cases, which has lasted for more than 4 years. And along with the big ransomware cases, I have also worked with some relatively small cases, which involves malware distribution and money laundering cases, which involves the cryptocurrencies. all of which builds up my field of interest, which is written at the bottom, the cybercrime, ransomware, cryptocurrencies, darknet, and so on. And currently, me and my colleagues are working for the hacking cases, which is committed by the government-supported hacking group called Kim Soo-ki of North Korea, or DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The Kim Soo-ki is the hacking group, the government-supported hacking group, along with the Lazarus group that just the previous presenter, Mohamed Darwish, just mentioned. And this group has currently discovered the relationship between their hacking campaigns and virtual assets. So today I'm going to introduce the investigative details that we have found so far on this DPRK hacking case. And these are the topics that I'm going to present, especially with the two main subtopics. One is phishing mail campaign, and one is ransomware campaign. So let me start the case overview. So I have written some summary in sentences, and I make some bold text, which involves the very important vocabularies, including 892 experts, 49 victims, and ransomware Frogo. But I guess this is somewhat complicated, so I'll just go over to the next overview picture. So this is a great overview that gives you a summary of the whole investigation case. And I'm going to explain one by one, starting from the fake emails. So all of this campaign, all of this investigation starts from those fake emails. Korean National Police has found that the North Korean hackers have sent hundreds of millions of fake emails to the Korean individuals. And especially we have found that at least 892 individuals within South Korea have received the fake emails from North Korean hackers. And those 892 individuals are not the ones that has been randomly selected individuals, but they are carefully chosen, carefully targeted individuals, all of who have some expertise and backgrounds on diplomacy, reunification, national security, and national defense. So, we have compiled lots of fake emails that has been sent by the DPRK hackers, and I brought one of them. So, before getting into the details, the mail itself is written in a very concise, very correct Korean sentences, and in a very polite manner. So as a Korean person who speaks Korean as a mother tongue language, I cannot find any awkward expressions or wrong sentences which make this fake email more suspicious. So I made an English translation version of this email so that you can see what's going on and how the hackers lures you to click on the link below. So the mail sender is introducing himself to be the news reporter of the Korean media company. And the mail reads that regarding the ROK US Summit Conference, which will be held in Korea 21st of next month, the president-elect stated that he expects the meeting to be blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the email, he said, I send this email to you to listen to the voices of the people, with the link of news articles below. Please write the comments on news articles. And the email is followed by the link, which really seems to be the link for the news article that has been just mentioned on the email. However, that is the link for the phishing page, which has been also created by the North Korean hacker. So if you click on the link, maybe expecting some news articles to pop up, you, the visitors or the victims, are redirected to this phishing page. This phishing page, you may not aware of this page, but this is mimicking the very popular Korean portal sites, which we call Naver.com. Like Naver.com is like a Google for South Korean people. So we usually use the Naver portal for our daily searches or daily email uses and so on. So this site is sophisticatedly mimicking those neighbor portal sites, and it asks you, the visitors, to type in ID and password for further authentication. So if you type in your ID and password and click on the Submit button, where you can find the green rectangle button at the bottom, then all the strings, all the credentials you just type in, ID and password informations, are delivered to the hackers, which makes your account victimized or hacked by the North Korean hackers. So I just give you an example of one type of email which is attached with a phishing page URL. And we have found another type of email which is directly attached with the executable malware files, or more in a plain text, the malware files or the virus. So in this email, again, the mail sender is introducing himself to be the secretary officer of the member of the National Assembly of South Korea. And the mail reads that, "Thank you for attending the seminar yesterday. Thank you for your opinion. Thank you for your presentation. And please fill in the document attached and reply back to me so that I can give you the expert fees for seminar attendance." And as you can see, the mail sender lures the victims to click on the attachment file and try to open it. And if you, the mail reader, download the attachment file and actually try to open it, then the malware, the virus, is executed to steal all the important data, all the important information from your PC. And most of the time, those stolen information is they result in the hacking of your computer, which means that the hacker can control and manage all the things happening on your computer. So these are the two typical examples of the emails sent by North Korean hackers. And even though these two emails seems very common and very trivial, this really is the start of this whole hacking campaign of North Korean people. So let me show you how these stolen credentials from the victims could be utilized by the North Korean hackers. So among the 892 individuals who received these fake emails, some people actually clicked on the URL to visit the phishing page, or have actually downloaded the attachment file to execute the malwares in their PCs. And we have found at least 49 people have been stolen with their accounts, the credentials, the ID and passwords of their accounts by the North Korean hackers. So the North Korean hackers use these credentials, the ID and password of the account ID, to periodically log in to their account IDs and read the emails received or sent by the victim accounts, and even steal some important intelligence, important information, or even the important document files attached to these emails. So this is the reason why we call these 49 people the surveillance targets. So, okay, as I have mentioned earlier, these people, the 49 people, including the 892 people, are not the ones who has been randomly chosen, but these are the people who have carefully chosen, who are the experts on diplomacy, reunification, national security, and national defense. And many of them are professors of the university, and we also see some people from private sector organization, private sector companies, or the academia. And maybe they might have targeted these people because these people might be a great source to get some important intelligence of South Korea, or like, for example, the geopolitical events in South Korea, or the foreign policy strategies of South Korea, and so on. So these stolen information has been used by the DPRK hacker to acquire some important intelligence, but at the same time, those information has been used to create another sophisticated email contents for the further fake emails. So let's assume that a hacker has acquired the credentials of the account, which is owned by the professor of the university, and he, through the periodical surveillance on that account, he came to know the fact that the professor has been working on a seminar which has been held maybe 2 days ago. Then there comes another chance for the hacker to send the upcoming emails for the seminar, maybe sending the mail to the maybe 200 and 300 participants of the seminar who attended the seminar 2 days ago, asking for them to click on the attachment file and fill it to receive the expert fees for the presentation. That we just had seen on phase 1, the fake email parts. And also, along with the information gathering and surveillance, some of these accounts were even used by the DPRK hackers to send another fake emails to their acquaintances or the people with similar backgrounds. And that means if your account has been stolen by the DPRK hacker by accidentally clicking on the phishing page URL or accidentally clicking on the malware attached, then your account can be utilized by the DPRK hacker, again, as their weapon to target your friends, your families, your companies, or your acquaintances, only to make them victimized again. And this really sounds like a scary scenario. So after the investigation on those fake emails and its victims, we, Korean National Police, proceed our investigation on the infrastructures used by the DPRK hackers. And the infrastructures used here includes the email addresses, which was used by them to send the fake emails, and some domains like blah.com, blah.net domains, which was used to operate the phishing pages by the DPRK hackers. And especially we focused on the servers, and so far we have found about 326 compromised server, hacked server worldwide. And we focused on the examination of the server, especially the ones that has been located in South Korea within our jurisdiction that we can cover. And the examination of these servers reveals the fact that some of these servers has been used by the hackers to directly send the fake emails or directly to access the victim accounts or victim PCs. But there are some other servers which were used by them as a hop server. And this means that the hacker made an intrusion onto the server, make it a compromised server, and use it again to make another hacking or make another intrusion into the other compromised servers, resulting in the expansion of their infrastructures on and on and on. And there is a word called multiple tier network infrastructures, which means the DPRK hackers access the victim server using several hop servers. And the main reason behind this is, of course, to hide themselves behind the scene so that the investigators like me cannot follow them easily. So, for example, if we find a fake email that has been sent by the hacker, then we are able to find the IP address which is used to send the fake emails. And if you find the IP addresses, we can find the servers that is allocated with those IP addresses. And then we came to see that the server is compromised by the DPRK hackers. And if we continue our examination on the server to find the external IP address that has been used to access this compromised server from remote distance, then we are only able to find another compromised server. And those compromised servers are most of the time distributed all around the world. And this makes our investigation even more complicated and even more difficult. And most importantly, we found some ransomware infections on some of these servers as represented in the number 19 at the bottom. And this is the most important findings from our investigation. So we have seen the total of 19 servers which were infected with ransomware, and especially the ransomware named Frogo ransomware during the time period of March 2021 to September 2022. And all of the victims were coerced to make a payment for the decryption of their servers. So ransomware, as it is getting more and more popular these days, some of the people here may already know what the ransomware is. And maybe there might be some people who even have a previous experience with ransomware infections, unfortunately. But I'm going to briefly introduce what the ransomware is. So the ransomware is a malware. It is a combination of the two English words, the ransom and software. It is a malware that encrypts all the essential data in your system, in your PCs, and it means you cannot access your document file, you cannot access the pictures, you cannot access the videos stored on your computer system. And after encrypting all the essential data in your system, then you're asked to make a payment for decryption of the data or to have your PCs back. And this is called a ransom payment. And these ransom payments are not paid, are not made with the fiat currencies like US dollars, Korean won, not dirham that is used in UAE. But most of the time, they are the victims are required to make a payment in cryptocurrencies, the virtual assets, which include the Bitcoins, Ethereum, Ripple, and Monero, and so on. So, and the picture that you can see right now is called a ransom note. And this is the text file that has been found, that can be found in every ransomware-infected PCs. And that includes the message from the hacker. And it has a great description, great detailed descriptions on how to make a ransom payment to have your PCs back. And this specific picture is from our investigation, the ransomware campaign committed by the DPRK hacker. And here, the DPRK hacker is kindly explaining to the victims by saying that to receive the decryptor, you should send the person ID. The person ID is written over at the top. Send this person ID to this email address, blah, blah, blah. The email address has been blurred for the investigative purposes, and I apologize for that. But anyway, we were able to acquire various kinds of ransomwares found on the victim PCs, and thus we were able to find the email addresses which has been used by the DPRK hacker for this ransomware campaigns. And further, we were able to find the Bitcoin addresses, which has been used by the DPRK hackers to receive the ransom payments from the victims. So all the things has been covered, and there might be someone who might ask how Korean National Police was able to find the person, the hacking group behind the scene, especially pointing out the Kim Soo-ki hacking group of North Korea. So Korean National Police has been working on these kind of cases, especially since 10 years ago. And these kind of cases here specifically means within South Korea. So we have compiled all the indicators and all the investigative leads from those previous cases, and we call it investigative profiling system. So we currently, if you're doing some investigation case and find some indicators from it, we typically compare the indicators from this current case to the indicators from the previous ones so that we can find out whether this case has been also committed by the same hacking group or not. And the indicators here includes the email addresses and IP addresses used by the hackers to send fake emails, to have illegal access to the victim accounts, to victim PCs, and so on. And also we some similar tactics, some similar account patterns used by the DPRK hackers, and also some similarity is in malwares, the malware functions and the technical structures of the malware itself. And from some of the fake emails, even though it's not very common, we can find some dialects only used by the North Korean people. So as a Korean, like South Korea and North Korea share the common language, Korean, we can understand and we can pronounce the word that is used in the fake emails. But there are some times that we find the word that is not familiar with us so that we cannot get the meaning of it right away. And that is the reason why they are using, that is the reason because they use the dialects and some fake emails, which is only used by the North Korean people. So all the things together, the email address, IP address, all the general tactics, and even the dialects, we come to the conclusion that this phishing email campaign and ransomware campaign has been also committed by the same hacking group, Kim Soo-ki of North Korea. And all the investigation details finding from this case has been shared within South Korea through several news releases made on June last year and October this year. And also it has been shared with the foreign countries, the foreign authorities, considering the fact that these malicious DPRK cyber threats could have on, not only on South Korea, but on the cybersecurity of all. And especially, we have shared some investigative details to UN Security Council, the sanctions of Committee on DPRK this year, and this case has been involved in their final report on the panel of experts, which was released on March 7th, 2023. And as you can see on the screen, there is a summary of this case, the things that I have just presented you in detail, and they are also mentioning the fact that for the first time, the National Police Agency of Republic of Korea has detected Kim Soo-ki using ransomwares for their malicious activities. Okay, and along with South Korea has been also expanding cooperation with United States to confront a range of DPRK cyber threats through ROK US Working Group meeting since August last year. And we are trying to share some important details about those cyber threats through the periodical offline meeting between the two countries. And the collaborative efforts of the two governments has led to the release of Joint Cybersecurity Advisory on June 2023 with the title, North Korea Using Social Engineering to Enable Hacking Think Tanks, Academia, and Media. And the main goal of this Joint Cybersecurity Advisory is to raise awareness of these malicious cyber activities of DPRK, and by providing some detailed information on how Kim Soo-ki Group operates, and also by sharing some general mitigations to the entities worldwide to better protect against their malicious activities. And the mitigation measures that has been mentioned on this cybersecurity advisory includes the following, but not limited to: the use of robust passwords and multi-factor authentication to better protect your accounts, and install the antivirus tools to computer so that you can protect your PC from hacking. And do not open documents shared via email unless the source is verified. And when in doubt, consult the organization's official website for correct contact information. And if you're not still sure, verify the identities through phone call or video call before engaging further. And all the details and more information can be found in English version on this website operated by the US government. And, okay. Yeah. And along with the cybersecurity advisory release, Korean government, especially led by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have sanctioned Kim Soo-ki hacking group and identified the two cryptocurrency addresses, especially the Bitcoin addresses, as identifiers for this Kim Soo-ki organization. And along with the public announcement of sanctions by government, Korean National Police has also shared some details of these identifiers to the cryptocurrency exchanges or virtual asset service providers worldwide, asking for the support to detect the non-authorized transactions related to DPRK hackers. And this is the final slide. And finally, there are some things that we have to think about with these case studies and its results. And first, this was the first case for Korean National Police to find the relationship between the North Korean hacker Kim Soo-ki and the ransomware or the cryptocurrencies. So this was very important, as we this was the first time for Korean National Police to find the relationship between the hacking group and the cryptocurrency or the virtual assets. But this is just a start, and we are expecting to see more and find more about those relationships, especially in connection with virtual assets. And that's the reason, and that's because the cryptocurrency, the virtual assets, which is considered to be the relatively new technology these days, are one of the currently the strongest and easiest method to secure monetary benefits from their criminal activities. And secondly, although this specific investigation with this case number has been leaded to the end, thus I was able to share some investigative details in public like here, this never means that their campaign is over, and their phishing mail campaign and even the ransomware campaigns are ongoing activities. And that is the reason why we should concentrate on how they operate, how they're attacking us. And that is the reason why we should be prepared enough to protect ourselves from their consistent cyber threats. And finally, it is not enough to emphasize the fact that not only South Korea is the victim of DPRK hackers, but all the countries all around the world could be a potential victim. And also, the DPRK actors are not only the ones who commit these kind of campaigns, but there can be other groups who can easily hop in with the similar tactics. And this is because, as all of you may already know, cyberspace is a world without borders, and all the infrastructures, including IP addresses, domains, servers, does exist anywhere on our Earth, connected to each other. So no one can be safe from their consistent and sophisticated activities. And here comes the clear conclusion that we should cooperate all together to secure the cyberspace now we live in and to fight against their malicious cyber threats. This is all I have for today, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jackie, for the presentation. We will now have a short coffee break and will commence in 20 minutes. So we will ask all audiences to please be available after 20 minutes. Please note there will be a group photo on the stage. You're all welcome. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests. I hope you enjoyed your coffee break. I would like to now welcome to the stage Ms. Nicole El-Khouri on her session, Key Challenges in Addressing Threats and Opportunities Related to New Payment Technologies in the Context of Countering the Financing of Terrorism.
Good morning again. If I had known the stage will allow me to finish my 10,000 steps Fitbit, I wouldn't have drafted my presentation, but so I would stand put for the presentation. Just to check. Okay. No, how do I go back? Yeah. Terrorist financing threat today is increasingly complex and diverse. Its scale, nature, and methods vary considerably depending on the proximity and the scope of terrorist activity, availability of technologies, financial needs of terrorist actors, and the regional and economic contexts. An increasingly popular trend in terrorism financing is a combined use of old and new ways to raise funds, which essentially combines the challenges and complexities related to each method, from detecting cross-border transportation of cash to tracing complex virtual transactions. I mentioned briefly the role of the Counterterrorism Executive Directorate in my opening remarks, but just to clarify again that, as I will be referring to it, CTED has a mandate to assess member states' implementation of counterterrorism and CFT measures as laid out by relevant Security Council resolutions, while taking into account international law, international human rights law, and humanitarian law. In conducting its assessments, CTED places an emphasis on requirements relating to the criminalization of terrorism financing, its prosecution, effective freezing mechanisms, conducting terrorism financing risk assessments, preventing the misuse of non-profit organizations and alternative remittance systems for terrorism financing purposes, and detecting and preventing illicit cross-border transportation of currency. Pursuant to several dedicated Security Council resolutions, CTED also explores the links between organized crime, illicit activities, and terrorism financing, which takes various forms, depending, as I mentioned, on the region and on how terrorists are able to operate. In recent years, UN Security Council repeatedly recognized that new and emerging financial technologies offer unprecedented opportunities in terms of innovation, efficiency, and financial inclusion. However, it is also noted with concern by the Council that financial services facilitated by such technologies present a risk of being misused for terrorist purposes. In this regard, CTED has been paying increased attention to terrorism financing risks associated with mobile payments, virtual assets, internet payment systems, and crowdfunding platforms, as well as the need to establish related effective partnerships with the private sector and ensure a multi-stakeholder approach. Over the course of our assessments, we have observed that most member states have considerably improved their CFT legal frameworks and mechanisms. However, their operational implementation often lags behind. As recognized by the Security Council, innovations in financial technologies may offer significant economic opportunities, but offer also a risk of being misused. The growing scale of the misuse has since been highlighted in several Security Council resolutions and analysis by the FATF and its regional bodies, as well as by members of the Counterterrorism Executive Committee Global Research Network, which gathers sort of academia, think tanks, private sector members, etc. The scale and types of abuse, as I mentioned, vary considerably. So we somehow have an understanding at this point of the threats. And examples of methods to raise funds for terrorist purposes include the abuse of social networking services used to solicit donations through traditional payment methods, content hosting services, online merchandise sales, and crowdfunding platforms. In its most recent report, the FATF identified donation-based crowdfunding as most likely to being exploited for TF or violent extremism purposes of all different kinds of crowdfunding. The four main forms in which crowdfunding platforms can be abused for terrorism financing purposes are mentioned in the FATF report, and they are: one, the abuse of humanitarian, charitable, or non-profit causes; the use of dedicated crowdfunding platform or websites; the use of social media platforms, messaging apps; and the fourth is the interaction of crowdfunding with virtual assets. Yet, the regulatory oversight of the crowdfunding industry globally is still fragmented, including as it relates to AML-CFT. Despite repeated instances of misuse of social media and crowdfunding platforms by terrorists for financial activities, many platforms or chat applications still have weak self-monitoring and moderation systems when it comes to terrorist financing. And this is, as I mentioned, what we have observed during numerous assessments of member states in this regard. Researchers, national authorities, and multilateral policymakers indicate that although cash and hawala type systems remain the prevalent methods used to move money for terrorist purposes, and they account for most TF-related transfers. There is also an increase of their use in combination with new payment methods, so mobile payment systems, virtual assets, and online exchanges and wallets have been abused for terrorist purposes. The often complex money trail of these methods pose challenges for financial investigators as well as for financial institutions when they interact. Some of these products can enable anonymous cross-border, peer-to-peer fund transfers, which can occur without the involvement of a virtual asset service provider. These risks are compounded by the continuing increase in types of VASPs and persisting gaps in their regulation and supervision globally. In its resolution 2462 of 2019, the Council called upon member states to assess and address potential risks associated with virtual assets, and as appropriate, the risks of new financial instruments, including but not limited to crowdfunding platforms. The Council also called in this resolution for a full use of new and emerging technologies to bolster financial inclusion and to contribute to the effective implementation of AML-CFT measures. Indeed, and as highlighted by the work of the FATF, for example, new technologies also have the potential to make AML-CFT measures in both the public and private sector faster, cheaper, and more effective. When used responsibly and proportionally, technology can facilitate data collection, processing, and analysis, and help actors to identify and manage terrorist financing risks more effectively. It is also important to recall that Resolution 2462, we at the Security Council committees, we love to mention resolutions, so be patient with that, please. So the Council demanded that member states ensure that all measures taken to counter terrorism, including measures to counter the financing of terrorism, as provided for in the resolution, comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, if applicable, international human rights law, and international refugee law. In this regard, member states should also take into account unintended consequences and impact on human rights on any measure they put in place to counter any risk or risk of abuse. Also in Resolution 2462, the Council urged Member States to implement the comprehensive international standards embodied in the 40 recommendations of FATF. Specifically, and as relevant to our meeting today, Recommendation 15 on new technologies. The recommendation basically indicates that countries and financial institutions should identify and assess the money laundering and terrorist financing risks that may arise in relation to two aspects. One, the development of new products and new business practices, including new delivery mechanisms. And second, the use of new and developing technologies for both new and pre-existing products. To manage and mitigate the risks emerging from virtual assets, countries should take steps to ensure that VASPs are regulated for AML-CFT purposes and licensed and registered and subject to effective systems for monitoring and ensuring compliance with the relevant measures called for in the FATF recommendations. However, the FATF analysis of jurisdictions revealed that jurisdictions are making limited progress in implementing the requirements on virtual assets and VASPs. So, for example, on the analysis done for 161 jurisdictions since 2017 proved that only 12.5% are evaluated as compliant with the implementation of Recommendation 15. Considering the speed at which new and emerging financial technologies are advancing, allowing for real-time cross-border movement of funds before the global regulatory system has applied controls and reporting requirements to the entities involved, member states should develop measures to identify and assess and counter the associated threats. There is a need to run after the development before criminals figure out a way to use it. So there is a need to increase the exchange of information and practices in this area by relevant authorities. Through our assessments, we have observed that in many countries, authorities struggle to keep pace with the new technologies and evolving trends, particularly in terrorism financing, and also including the abuse of emerging technologies. Successfully tracking cyber financial flows does require technological capacities, both in terms of trained human resources and the necessary hardware and software, which often we've noticed lags behind. Moreover, CTED's assessment and analysis show that law enforcement and judicial authorities face a series of obstacles to effective cooperation with respect to gathering and using digital evidence in terrorism cases. We often notice during our assessment visits to member states that sometimes domestic authorities, even though they work on the same project, on the same topic, do not work together on the same topic. And often our assessment and our visits allowed them to be in the same room together for the first time often. So there is a need to foster this kind of judicial authorities, law enforcement to sit together and work together on a specific matter. Increased sophistication of investigative techniques, resources and tools to detect terrorism financing has also become a challenge from the human rights perspective, including with respect to the lack of adequate safeguards for privacy and data protection. So member states are running to regulate this new and emerging issues, but also they are failing to match it with adequate safeguards and put this in writing at least. States often also lack clear cooperation and information sharing frameworks and protocols, as well as access and connectivity to information sharing mechanisms, such as regional and international counterterrorism and criminal databases and network. So the issue is not only at the domestic level between the different authorities, but also with countries in the neighboring region or further. The complexity of terrorism financing requires also a coordination of public and private sector. And it's an achievement in itself that a meeting like this one is gathering such a high number, as I've heard more than 3,500 participants online. This is exceptional and an important way to show how the UAE and the local authorities give attention to fostering this important partnership between private and the public sector. So we also hope that we will also learn today and tomorrow from the private sector their own concerns and how they are trying to mitigate these. Zooming in on the gaps that we've identified, particularly in addressing terrorism financing related to emerging technologies, the Executive Directorate has observed in addressing this matter that new and emerging payment and fundraising technologies remain alarmingly slow. The regulation of these remain alarmingly slow, despite consistent calls for action from the Security Council and from FATF. Most countries require technical assistance, so this is a matter that is ongoing, or at least access to good practices from other states, because often this exchange of expertise is also very important. In order to keep pace with the rapid evolution, there is an urgent need to enhance the specialized expertise of personnel engaged in handling increasingly complex cases. And this concerns both law enforcement, judicial authorities, personnel of financial intelligence unit, etc. The key obstacles to the detection, investigation, and prosecution of cases that we've assessed through our country assessments is, for example, and involve the misuse of social media and encrypted messaging platforms and relate to particularly the sheer volume of social media services, user accounts, and social media usage. You know better than me that we're talking about millions and millions of such accounts and platforms. There's also the difficulty for member states to trace and identify the individuals involved who often hide behind these accounts or names. The complexity involved in the analysis of digital forensic evidence. So as I mentioned earlier, it's also a matter of hardware, software, natural capacity building of individuals, but also having the appropriate tools. And finally, the transnational nature of procedures for obtaining evidence, which, as you know, it's not a matter only of a domestic issue, but there's a need with often to connect with member states that usually do not cooperate properly with each other or do not have proper channels to obtain information. Authorities in several states acknowledge their capacity gaps in following the complex money trail posed by blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and crowdfunding. There is a persistent need to address fundraising loopholes, such as the super chat facility, or brands advertising and monetizing alongside terrorist content. So you often realize that third parties have no clue sometimes the implications of their branding or what they're trying to put on social media, and that they need to be made aware of the risks involved. Now, as means to mitigate these challenges that I've mentioned we've observed with member states, the committee often recommends to member states the following. First, an understanding of the exact nature and scope of the threat remains critical for developing appropriate measures, and we cannot stress on this enough. The ways in which new technologies are abused by terrorist actors can vary considerably, and over-focusing on risks related to certain types of new products or services while overlooking more traditional and commonly used ones can be just as inefficient and unhelpful as not keeping pace with the evolution of the relevant technologies. So restrictive responses that are based on assumed risks of terrorism financing are often unnecessary and disproportionate to the advantages of new financial technologies, including their potential to address financial inclusion and risk violating international law, including human rights law. The UAE, on that point, the UAE, for example, its national strategy for AML CFT has 12 objectives. And one of these objectives is continuing to deepen the understanding of risks. So this actually mirrors what we hope to achieve by recommending measures to take by member states. Second, as a recommendation for member states to be on top of this matter, states need to continuously review and readapt, where applicable, their existing regulatory framework to ensure that they are relevant, targeted, and effective to address vulnerability that come with emerging financial technologies. To do this successfully, states need to ensure that their response measures are built for purpose, rooted on evidence-based risk assessment rather than theoretical vulnerabilities, and in line with the principles of necessity, proportionality, legality, and non-discrimination under international human rights law. They should also be balanced against the potential for new financial technologies to ensure financial inclusion as a key enabler of various sustainable development goals, as well as for innovating payments and the means to transact them safely in crisis situations. I also refer back to one other goal of the UAE AML-CFT strategy, which states the continuing need to update the legal frameworks, taking into consideration the risk-based approach. So this is also one of the goals, and that the UAE is considered to be working upon these. Third, states should continue to enhance their capacity to effectively detect and disrupt the abuse of new technologies, including through successful investigation and prosecution, reinforced interagency and international cooperation, and developing, as I mentioned, public-private partnerships. It's important to note here that terrorism financing disruption strategies go beyond reactive investigative actions and aim at using the full and cross-disciplinary spectrum of legal, administrative, and policy measures to disrupt and degrade the capacity of terrorist groups to operate. Often we notice that most countries are content with prosecuting and having a sentence on terrorism activity, but fail to continue important and mandatory financial investigation. And that causes the loss of money trail and sometimes does not allow to prevent another terrorist activity from happening. So hence the stress on important effective detection and disruption before this happened. And given the cross-border nature of the threat, it's important for member states to promptly share early warning type information. And this is also lagging behind because it's influenced by the overall level of cooperation between one member state and the other. International cooperation, including sharing of expertise, is key in raising awareness on risks and vulnerabilities in states, particularly those who have not yet faced or detected a threat. So, also, one of the recommendations is to enhance the collaboration with CTED and relevant international and regional organizations, including the FATF, to explore further ways to strengthen the effectiveness of the international response to the use of new payment and fundraising methods. You will have access to this presentation, so I'm not going to enumerate every aspect of it. I hope it will be useful for you to read that again. Finally, last but not least, states should evaluate impact of any unintended or adverse consequences of new CFT measures related particularly to new technologies. It's very easy to slide to an area where abuse of freedom, right of expression, right to donate to a charitable cause is reached fast without proper safeguards and a proper legal framework in place. Indeed, concerns about human rights violations, arbitrary surveillance, and data protection breaches have been raised in relation to the use of technology in CFT. Technology has the ability to streamline due diligence in banking greatly, which greatly reducing the burdens and delays in the work of the MPOs and humanitarian actors. At the same time, if not properly developed, technology may also increase the risk of discrimination, exclusions, disproportionate targeting of vulnerable groups. Based on information gathered in the context of the country visits undertaken on behalf of the Counterterrorism Committee, as well as through direct dialogue with member states, such as this meeting, CTED is also able to recommend ways to address the identified gaps I mentioned in the first part of the presentations and challenges, and facilitate the delivery of technical assistance. Hence, our close cooperation with valuable members such as the OCT or UNODC. This was mentioned in the morning. I will repeat this. In October last year, the Counterterrorism Committee adopted the Delhi Declaration on countering the use of new emerging technologies for terrorist purposes. The declaration focused mainly on the main concerns regarding the abuse of drones, information and communication technology, as well as new payment and funding methods for terrorist purposes. On CFT particularly, the declaration specifically called on member states to further enhance the specialized expertise and capacity of the authorities engaged in handling increasingly complex cases of terrorism financing. It also speaks about the importance of human rights, civil society engagement, and how we are going to work together on this challenge. And to implement the declaration, as I also mentioned this morning, CTED is currently developing a set of binding guiding principles for the consideration of the Counterterrorism Committee in close consultation with partners from civil society, academia, private sector, and relevant international and regional organizations. Among other areas, CTAD will continue to work with its partners, including OCT and other global compact entities, to support all member states in these 4 key focus areas that I had just mentioned before, related to the threat and opportunities of new payment technologies in the context of CFT. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nicole, for the presentation. I would like to welcome to the stage Mr. Abdel Sattar al-Najjar from the Financial Intelligence Unit of Egypt on his session, Perspective on Investigating Virtual Assets Relating to Organized Crime. Welcome.
Good morning. Since this is the first time to speak, I'd like to thank the UAE authorities and the UNOCT for this kind of invitation. And I'm always happy to see many familiar faces where we meet in meetings, bilateral or in the regional event. I'd like in the outset to introduce myself. My name is Abdel Sattar al-Najjar, just call it Sattar for brevity, or Abdul. On the domestic level, I am the Deputy General Manager of the Egyptian Financial Intelligence Unit, responsible for the requests for assistance and what comes next to the borders, in terms of transactions. And also, I'm the, the National EML CFT Mutual Evaluation Coordinator for the country. And I'm also responsible for the oversight of the proper implementation of the TFS in Egypt. And also we provide consultation to national authorities and financial institutions on the unilateral sanctions as well. On the regional and international aspects, I'm a FATF assessor, and I'm a member also, a lead reviewer in the ICRG AM, the Africa Middle East Joint Group. And I'm also UNODC Regional Advisor for the Financial Investigation and the GIZ for the strategies of the EML CFT. Yes, we have a very important topic on the how to trace, investigate, and most probably tomorrow we'll be speaking about the next stages when it comes to the seizure and confiscation of virtual assets. I'd like just to highlight in the beginning, it's not as easy as it might apparently seem. It's not a walk-in customer. It's not a customer at Emirates MBD Bank where you can easily identify by the name, full address, profiling, nature of transaction, and where you can easily just bring up the phone as an FAU and bring the information from whatever financial institution, or you can easily send a request for assistance from another country. So the level of obscurity or the anonymity of the virtual assets makes it very, very hard for local authorities to even kick off an investigation, not to come to the end, and we will see later tomorrow about some of the challenges that we have already faced in this regard. So the relative obscurity of the virtual currencies makes it very hard to even identify the transaction and relate it to a very specific person, and also to move it forward to understand whether this person relates in any way to criminal offenses, to financial crimes. So it's not as easy as it might seem. But cryptocurrencies have been made to be this way. So these are the challenges, and we have to work out solutions. And here I'm going to share some of the experiences that we have done in Egypt, and also an introduction on the overall scale, what are the challenges, and what are the main steps that we would seek as investigators for this. And also, it's very important that the local and I would say domestic authorities working on investigation generally, not only on the new technology thing, understand very well what does it mean to have a cryptocurrency asset in the wallet during searching a suspect, during when you storm in a house, for example, looking for terrorist financiers, and when you open the laptop, how can you identify that this person might have wallets, and these wallets might relate to him or to an organized crime, or does it have to do with any illegal activity in the country, or does he store the keys, the private keys in the laptop? That easy. We will dig further to this today and tomorrow as well. And I'd like to highlight also that there must be technical capacity for the law enforcement officers and also for the investigators. Technical capacity because, when you move from one day to the other, criminals are moving rocketingly more speedy and steady enough than we usually do. Okay. So many people would understand or believe that cryptocurrency are completely anonymous. The good news is that some of them are anonymous and some of them are pseudonymous, and we will dig further to the types of this either today or tomorrow. Because transactions of the Bitcoin and other virtual currency are publicly reported on the chain, on the blockchain. And we have address for the wallet, we have hash for the transaction or the transaction ID, and also when you dig further to this account, you may find that Sattar, he's the owner of the transaction, and sometimes you will have it, and we have two cases that will showcase that. It's a nested account, so all of the transactions that you see hopping on and off, it's not relating to the same or specific person in this regard. Law enforcement and regulators, they get to know that and also the financial intelligence unit, because they should play a very vital role. By the way, we receive many requests for information from counterpart financial institutions or intelligence unit on transaction relating especially to terrorism financing, and with the context of the region that we will live in. They are misusing also the cryptocurrency, and the more developed your technical knowledge is, as an investigator or a financial intelligence official, it's the more likely that you will have very innovative methods to pierce the privacy of the transaction. For example, you need to have chain analytics tools, sure, and we have some of them here around the meeting room, just to dig further to see if this specific hash or address of the transaction, does it relate to any other person? Does it relate or control other addresses that we call it common spend? Okay. So, to kick off a financial investigation, we need to understand, as a financial investigator, what I'm looking for usually. I usually look for criminals, proceeds, and perhaps victims, right? So, when you start a cryptocurrency, forensic, or asset tracing fashion, your main target would be the perpetrator of the potential crime or their funds. So what can you look into as an investigator? What can you find? Based on the open source intelligence, information available to the FAU, law enforcement, interviewing of the suspect. So these are main sources of information that you can rely on even the forensic examination of machines, mobile, laptop, so accounts, Facebook, WhatsApp, and we will see cases like this. What are the main things that, what are the main things we are looking for? It's attribution data. You need to attribute data to a specific person or specific entity. In a very broad meaning, you need to make meaningless data relate and be helpful to you in your investigation. Also, we'll have transaction mapping, and we'll come later to this, just to have flow charts linking people, because, for example, as an FAU, when you move case to the law enforcement or to the prosecutorial agency, and just writing a memo of 100 pages on the technical issues, they will never understand this. It will keep you at the same place all the time. So when you need to understand this, you need to have like transaction mapping, cluster analysis. This is what we spoke about a minute ago, about the common spend. Is this address related to other person? How many addresses relating to them? And we'll see flow charts about this as well. Historical data, transactions, and IP addresses, and we'll come later to this. This is very common chart for the attribution data, is to turn unhelpful data, such as when you look and you find hash, which is letters. What does it resemble? What is this phone number? What are those 12 or 24 seeds written in a Word format? What is this hardware thing labeled ledger? So you don't even understand this. What you need to do as an investigator is to turn unhelpful data into real world and entities and events, just like illustrated here. And when you do transaction mapping, what's helpful about this is converting transactional data into visual maps so that you can easily digest and draw conclusions based on this. Does it have any fraud scheme? Does it relate to any of the organized crimes that you discovered on a normal or traditional financial investigation? Is it fishy? Is it real? Does it have any value? Because sometimes you consume like a month in a case, and I'll tell you funny things later, in a case and it turned out to be zero. You start an investigation where when you interview the subject, he admits that he owns crypto assets, and he just gives you the password and everything, so you're happy as an investigator, and you keep it. And once you move on with your investigation, 2 days later, you find the balance zero, because you are not technically equipped, or you are not vigilant enough to the technical steps that this person might have backed up the password somewhere. So you just took him to the cage, and his wife was happy in the balcony having a nice coffee and moving the funds somewhere else. Okay? So you need to link persons to assets and to identify whether they have funds or not. And also, and this will be tackled very carefully today, inshallah, tomorrow, inshallah, about how to seize, what are the most common methods used to seize and move it. Is it national wallets and that? And also, the transaction mapping would help, as an financial intelligence unit does, to show interaction by the subject with the known, not entities and individuals which are accomplice to the crime, and also by the exchanges, because sometimes you need to understand, is it a peer-to-peer transaction? Has it been undertaken through an exchange? Is this exchange house existing in your country? Is it abroad? Do you have a nice relation with the other country just to request for information about this? Do they possess the information? Is the information that is available, is it relevant to your investigation? And so many steps like this. So you just trace it from point A to point C. For example, we have addresses, we have transactions. You might get to know, firstly, that this transaction is fishy. By the way, I would come later and with details. In Egypt, we ban cryptocurrency. Okay, So we are not regulating cryptocurrency. And that's why we're quite, you will find it very strange. Why do you guys crack down on those people? They are just, it's bits and pieces. So we ban it. So when you do transaction mapping, it gives you an idea about the transactions, volumes, moving from which place to another place. Is it an exchanger? Is it a peer-to-peer? Is it Bitcoin? Is it USDT? Is it Ripple? Is it other Monero, Zcash? Is it anonymous? So if, for example, if you're working on a Monero, so it's for me as an investigator I would be helpless because you have at the end to burn it. You are not going to move it. You are not going to seize it because it has been I would say tailored with the stealth addresses, like proxies. So the address that you see is not the real address of the person. So these are, and the cluster we have already discussed this. You have to relate the cluster transaction. When you see individual address, is it an individual address that relates to Satar, or does Satar control or relate to other addresses as well? What we call it collective investigation fashion. And also the total volume of transaction is very important because it can give you an overall idea about, is this person active or idle? Is it one-stop transaction? Because we have received a request for information from one of the financial intelligence unit, our counterparts, on a person who moved funds. They were little, were just worth $40. He sent it to through an exchanger based in this country to the dark web to a carding center, which is illegal. And we started to dig further into that case. When you investigated on the public or the open blockchain, what I found, I was a person working on this with my colleagues, I found it more than 240 million US dollar broadly relating to this address. Oh, what the profession of this person? When we got the information, we found he's an ordinary man working in tourism in Sharm el-Sheikh. So no way to possess, no way to have ability to those kind of volume of transaction. But when you use analytical tools, you dig further and you find this is not his account, it's a nested account, and this poor guy has already done only one transaction to the dark web that was $40. And then you might decide just, you don't have funds to seize. And you may decide that these are irrelevant information that you received from the other country would take you another way. We, law enforcement, financial intelligence unit, usually pay attention when you have many transactions and many people involved because of the impact. Because, and I've enjoyed the presentation of the risk assessment of the virtual assets. We depend, because in Egypt we have successfully concluded our extensive virtual assets risk assessment very soon. One of the main aspects that we rely on is the transacting volume, regardless of the amount, because if you have, for example, 1 million people transacting in the country in virtual asset with amounts like this, it might be like this in no time. Also, some of the data that you will look for is the IP addresses. IP addresses help me as an investigator to identify, for example, geographic location. Because I've told you already that we ban or restrict cryptocurrency. Is this person transacting, trading, exchanging, investing, providing platforms for the virtual currency in the country? So the level of criminalization is different if he is in a regulated market and using me just as a proxy. So it's sometimes help in the identification of the geographic location. But again, very technical issue here. when you capture a subject, if you don't understand the technical aspects and you don't understand what is this, you can destroy everything, right? So you can just take the laptop, you shut it down, so you wipe out all the RAM memory, so no way to do detailed forensic examination of the machine to detect any traces. So what we do is to make like sniffing, or and I was sitting with our colleague here to sniff coffee. So this is sniffing for IP addresses. Okay. One of the most, again, this is a very high-level presentation. So use of blockchain analytic program, it helps the competent authorities, and especially the law enforcement, to understand the transactions, volumes, linkage to people, sometimes geographic location, and sometimes we receive information from the analytics company. Does it relate to any high-risk zone or not? Is it linked to any cluster that might be involved in organized crime in your country or otherwise? And by the way, we received very, very useful information from those people. For example, we received information. I've worked in this field for many years, and I was having an idea that we have immensely Bitcoin comes at the top in transaction. For example, when we receive information about the overall transacting based on the chain, it's not. It's USDT. So for example, if we compare transactions, and these figures are true, 1,680 USDT versus 89 BTC. So when you receive information like this, it makes you understand the risk very well and know pretty much why do people decide to go to this transaction or to this model of Bitcoin and not the other one. Okay. These are the main steps of tracing crypto to identify the subject. So the subject can easily be identified through a suspicious transaction report filed to the FAU, request for information coming from a counterpart, financial intelligence unit, and investigation or interviewing done by the law enforcement. And sometimes I know cases in Egypt that has been discovered by coincidence. He is, for example, they might notice that there is heavy consumption of electricity in this place, and this place is not well inhabited by people. So when they dig further, they discover mining hub for people, and this is not legal in Egypt. So you have firstly to identify a subject, whether an entity or a person, and then is there any reason for suspicion? The case in Egypt, as long as you find any cryptocurrency, there is a reason for suspicion because you restrict it. And in some countries, you need to understand, is it linked to any other crime or not? Or is it just Satoris moving funds or owning funds? And this is what we call it as investigators, the context of investigation. For example, if you capture a person in the course of drug trafficking investigation, so there is a context for the investigation that gives you a trigger that these assets may relate and may not to the crime under investigation. And also you need to understand and to identify the addresses, hashes, IDs of the transaction, okay? Because this is very helpful when you do the flow chart. You need also to check the transactions, whether inflow or outflow, and we'll see now a chart that quite illustrates this. Is this person receiving too much? For example, if I'm investigating a suspect for terrorism financing, is he sending too many transactions to many people? Is it one to many? Is it many to one? So is it high-risk territory inside the country? Is it in a conflict zone? And we could spot one of the transactions in a nationally designated terrorist entity. We could spot it from the open source. And also, you need to check if associated with any criminal activity, and is the transaction being done through an exchanger, or is it a peer-to-peer? Is it regulated, not regulated? And the nice thing about this is you know quite certainly that there is an entity that you can directly, as a regulator, hit to requesting specific information about this person, volume of transaction, identifiers to base your analysis on. For example, this is an overview of a case study that took place in Egypt. And as I've already illustrated, the status in Egypt is banned, but this doesn't stop anyone from transacting. And this is why the FATF recommendation 15, and tomorrow I think we'll tackle very broadly the updates on this recommendation. This is why the recommendation 15 asked countries, regardless of regulation or restriction, to undertake comprehensive risk assessment of virtual assets and virtual asset service providers, just to understand if this being used in crimes in the country, the volume, the impact, and this is very important. So it's not really stopping anybody from transacting. And these, for our colleagues, non-Arabic speakers, this is a proof that people may deal in cryptocurrency despite the restriction. For example, the lower part, somebody is trying to sell his apartment in one of the New Cairo suburbs in return for BTC. And also, there's mobile wallet cash transfers in return for BTC. And the other one is USDT. And the other one is USDT, which is very common in Egypt. And I know personally, a dentist, he is accepting Bitcoin in Alexandria. So despite the ban, you may face transaction, yes. And also we have received an email from the FATF very recently that we will be listed in the most substantive activity countries in the Bitcoin or in the virtual assets in the region. It's because we have many people who might have downloaded the apps. They might have owned Bread wallet, blockchain, Cilium, so they just downloaded because they might have the dealers more than the transaction volume as a trigger. Okay? So we have spoken about recommendation 15. One more thing to highlight here is, even if you restrict a financial activity, you have a mandate as a country, as per the FATF recommendation, is to identify natural and legal persons who undertake this activity without a license. Because as per the central bank's law in Egypt, nobody is allowed to deal, own, transact, mediate, invest any activity of the virtual asset unless they get a license from the central bank. And without this license, you are carrying a criminal activity which might be subject to imprisonment and also fines as well. So as part of the team handling this issue, how can we identify that this person, natural person or legal person, is undertaking a specific activity against the law? We know we do what we call internet scrapping. We have a dedicated team for this. They might, I know, that has been shut down for the local Bitcoin. Yeah, I know some people are nodding. Yeah, but this is what we used to do. That those people, despite the ban, they would offer to sell and buy cryptocurrency. So, and the funny thing is that you may find WhatsApp phone, email accounts, Facebook account, Telegram channel. When you dig further into this, you can get more information, as we might know right now. But sadly, the local Bitcoin has been shut. So sometimes when you have a username, you can employ what you call the open source intelligence or investigation. You might use some of the tools, for example, the name checkers, to identify that username. Does he have any publicly available information on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, or not? You need just to understand if this person at hand is the same person who advertises for black market, for example, in the foreign exchange market, black market, and I know cases where people used to buy hash in Hurghada, Egypt, and paying with BTC, you know? So these are some of the cases. And by the way, the one to the right, we have got in intelligence reports and also from our open source investigation, it's a nationally designated entity as a terrorist entity since 2017. Okay, therefore, more information that we need to prepare for this person or subject. We need to have an open source intelligence dossier containing this person, for example, Amr al-Qadi. Is there any additional information? Is there any available phone number for them? We got the numbers. Is there any payment methods? And the nice thing is that we will find, for example, this is Vodafone Cash, which is a mobile wallet. QNB, MBE, FAB, Fawri, CIB, Western Union. So here you have leads where you can head directly to the financial institution and ask about this person using his name if you have the full name, ID, number, emails, because our financial institutions, they used to have the names, phone numbers, and emails for sending statements as well. So you might have some of the triggers. Okay, again, some of the accounts. There are WhatsApp, there are Facebook, where you can dig more information about this person, and how many transactions, how many confirmed trades, the feedback about this person, and when was it the last time for him to transact in Bitcoin. For example, we could spot a address for the wallet. This person is on the Trident forum, and this is his Telegram channel where he used, and it's funny, he's writing the name, phone numbers, it's public. The reason I'm putting this public, because it's public information, so it's not sanitized. Okay? So we could spot here, as I've stated in the beginning of the presentation, that the address wallet that ends with the X8V. Okay. Even if the websites are obsolete or the forums has been closed by governments, you can use the web archives to search some of the historical data and get more information about this person. It's very tiring, and there are tools to make it easy for this. We could identify that this person has been a broker, okay, and has been also relating to trade-based money laundering, and is pending investigation now, by the way. So, for example, if you do it manual, it's hard to find the cluster of transactions or addresses that relate to this person. For example, how many transactions were in this wallet that ends in X8V is 55, okay? Total addresses related to this person is not only one, it's 67. So this is an analytical tool that might help you identify, for example, when you use the specialized tool. It could identify that the incoming transfers 55, so we're good. The in, total value in US dollar, and the out. And someone would ask a question, how can the outgoing transaction might be more than the in? Because at the time he received the Bitcoin, it was denominated at a specific price as US dollar, which might be different at the time when he received it or sent it. Okay? And here you'll find the many people putting the funds in and the relation to some of the platforms here. Okay, let's move on. So this is, the previous slide was the individual address. This is the whole cluster controlled by this person, 67, which is amounts to a very huge number. And here you can identify the destination of his money. The main platform is working on it. Okay, how's how in the investigation? I don't want to dig further than this. You need to identify the main trend about the senders into this wallet. and the receivers of the wallet and the usage as well. He's a broker, customers cashing out, exchanging virtual assets to fiat and vice versa. Some of the transactions were turned out to be administrative fees. You know, that the funny thing is that you may discover that the import and export companies, so that's why he is pending investigation on possible trade-based money laundering. And also, we have initiated international cooperation requests to those countries where he used to send or receive transactions from, and he also is pending investigation on possible trade-based money laundering. This is a case that I have referred to in the beginning of my presentation. We have received information from one of the FAUs about a person who has opened an account, one of the exchanges called a blockchain, for example. Yeah. So the subject carried out some transactions to a fraud dark web website. He is an Egyptian national. He doesn't live in that country of registration. So after examination, he is living in Sharm el-Sheikh. He has never been to this country. So apparently, he opened the account remotely using the website, physical visit. So in all cases, he maintains an account at that exchanger, but he doesn't reside in this country. Okay? And by the way, we received all the IP addresses, the hashes of the transaction. So when we use the blockchain analytic software, this is the individual transaction of this person. Okay? So it's big. And also, by the way, we could detect the date, exact time, and the amount of the transaction, which is very helpful. And is it peer-to-peer or through an exchanger? And what's the binary tree for this transaction? And this is the whole thing. This is a transaction that we could spot PP24, which is a coding fraud dark web. Okay? As I has illustrated, this person, when we firstly started the investigation, we found like more than 250 million US dollars, but in fact, they do not relate to this person. They relate to the exchanger himself. This is quite apparent in this one. Thank you so much for listening. I don't want to keep you before lunch. This is what I learned. You know, people, when they are close to lunch, they are quite sleepy. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Abdel Sattar, for this discussion. We will now have a lunch break and will commence at 2 p.m. sharp. Enjoy. Welcome back, esteemed guests. I hope you enjoyed your lunch break. We will now commence to our last session for today on counterterrorism and new technologies. We welcome to the stage Mr. Kamal Anwar.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Is this the clicker? Yeah. So my name is Kamal Anwar from the UN Office of Counterterrorism. I came in here a couple of hours ago from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, where we also had a 2-day crypto counterterrorism training. And it was a while ago since I've been in that part of the world, that region, Central Asia, Uzbekistan, that region. It was, in fact, I think for me, about 16 years ago, since I used to work In Afghanistan, I used to work at the Afghan, Uzbek, Afghan, Turkmenistan border areas. I was in the Norwegian army back then. I was a NATO soldier there 16, 17 years ago. And part of what we did back then was that we had, we used to basically arrest people, what is kind of known as in the FATF language, cash couriers, people coming in from those border areas with a lot of cash, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of hard cash, and we would confiscate it because it was usually money that was through some smuggling were going to either the Taliban or to some criminal groups associated who then also would pay a portion, most likely to Taliban. And cut to about 12 years after this, after I was working there, in 2019, that's when I started working for the UN Office of Counterterrorism. One of the first tasks I had with a colleague, we were developing a global program on countering the financing of terrorism. And one of the areas that we were discussing and which was going to be part of our program was crypto, virtual assets. But me and my colleague, we didn't know too much about it, and there was even like some people who would say maybe crypto is not a priority, maybe you should focus on other safety areas, just keep virtual assets as a type of a priority. And I wasn't sure either myself. I did remember, the confiscating hard cash from cash couriers at the Turkmen, Uzbek, Afghan border areas. So that's kind of like my knowledge of terrorism financing came from there. But I did decide then in the end to do this 6-week online course at MIT, which was a very good course. It was covered the basics of crypto and blockchain development. And they kind of gave me the basis to know more about crypto and to integrate in a better way a portfolio related to virtual assets into our global program that was growing and launching. And it is interesting to think back at, because in the last 4 years since this happened, there is no one anymore who would say similar things, that crypto is not a priority, even though it's not hard cash. But crypto is not a priority when you talk about CFT, terrorism financing, that maybe it's not that important. Now, 4 years later, it definitely is something that we do prioritize, and I don't think I know anyone who working with AML CFT would just say something like that. And that kind of brings me over to my presentation. I'm going to quickly go through a little bit about new and emerging technologies, because it's a bit of a portfolio that goes a little bit together in the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy, where we talk about different new and emerging technologies in the same space, not necessarily that they're completely related in terms of what technology they represent, but just that they have the same common in common, that they have the same area in our strategy. Just a little bit about our work we do. We have, like I mentioned, we did end up, prioritizing crypto, and have been working with crypto around the world for the last couple of years. And when it comes to the new and emerging technologies portfolio, very often it's virtual assets that kind of gets looped in with drones, with 3D printed weaponry, with AI. There's some synergies there, but also. I like to at least mention it so that we also can separate it a little bit and not get too confused by it. And especially when it comes to the UN Global CT strategy, which was updated this last summer, a couple of months ago, 3-4 months ago. As you can see here in the text there, when it comes to potential use of new and emerging technologies, that artificial intelligence, 3D printing, virtual assets, UAS, commercial drones, these are kind of looped in together. So I just like to kind of reference to that so that we know why we often mention these together, because that's how our UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy is drawn up. And as you can see, drones as one of the emerging technologies, it's more the well-known danger risk we have. We already from 2015-16, ISIS, Daesh started using commercially available drones for conducting attacks. And then this 3D printing, although it's still kind of a new thing. I mean, there is, for example, some rebel groups who use 3D printed weaponry to some extent. The evidence is probably that it's more of a rudimentary weapon. I haven't tried it myself. I'm a bit curious about it. But still, as you can see here from a very recent conviction that happened in Finland, where neo-Nazis, this was a terror conviction where amongst others was that they had been making FCG-9 weaponry. And just further on the strategy as well, virtual assets does get, as you can see here, a definite, large and defined space so that we have the priority we need to do events and trainings, awareness raising, such as this and other, and support from member states to do so. This is just a little bit about the plans that we have for the coming year. In the map, you can see some of the areas where we are working in orange from the CFT program side. And yeah, so that was kind of a little bit of the intro. I just want to then talk about more about the examples and something that has happened in crypto lately, just to kind of give a little bit of the context that we are working with. So first, some old examples. The one that I usually, I don't know for sure, but maybe is the oldest example that we know of is actually this attack that happened in Norway, 2011, where we still don't know for sure. It happened in Oslo, my hometown, when we still don't know for sure, but the terrorists did claim to have made profits as an early adopter of blockchain technology. It is an interesting example because it's back in 2011. Crypto didn't really take off until 2017-ish, even though it's been around since 2008, 2009. It is just interesting to note that, that this is very typical with new and emerging technologies, also with other things like drones, 3D printing, that, it's very quick for criminals and terrorists to adopt that technology and start figuring out ways to use it for their own nefarious purposes. So yeah, we don't know for sure that he actually made money off it. And also another issue that was back in 2011 was that probably not a lot of countries in the world, so it's not very unique to Norwegian law enforcement, but that had very well functioning and larger capacities, blockchain analytical capacities to conduct investigations. And this is also then another example that often sometimes comes up. This is the kind of the quote-unquote lost ISIS money since when ISIS had this large-scale setback in 2017. The estimates of how much money is still unaccounted for, it ranges from 25 million and all the way sometimes up to 300. I would personally guess it's maybe closer to 25 than 300. And I don't think that all this money is, I think, a lot of this money probably, maybe some is buried, some is hidden somewhere. Maybe some foreign terrorist fighters just took it home with them in their pocket, and maybe some are in the danger of remobilization, or maybe some are not. But it is a fair assessment to assume that at least some of that money probably is in virtual assets somewhere. It could be a couple of thousand, a couple 100,000, maybe $1 million or $2 million, hard to say. But it's worth noting that, when you're working with different countries, different jurisdictions around the world, it's very difficult to know, who might be sitting on those wallets, where in the world they are, who they are, and how they can potentially have this quick access to a significant amount of funds. This example is from the Easter bombings in Sri Lanka. I like to mention this because it also illustrates some of the difficulties of both figuring out for sure whether crypto was used and also what the part of the reason is, because this is an attack where there was some evidence found by an institute in Israel that a Canadian gateway was used to partially fund this attack. And then you can imagine, the companies in Canada is here, and then Israel is here, and then Sri Lanka is over here. So just geographically, they're so far apart. But then also they have different systems, different priorities. Just like the coordination-wise, I've tried to figure out a little bit more about what has happened in terms of investigation after the attack. And haven't really found anything, but I do know that Sri Lanka, especially now, they do struggle with, of course, with a limited amount of resources. And then when it's so difficult to track, then of course you have to make your priorities or which leads you want to track or not. So really, highlighting this with the investigations of how difficult it can be to coordinate and to really also get priority for something like crypto. That's not, still isn't something that a lot of people, normal people, quote unquote normal people, know a lot about. Here's just an example of 2015. So very early on already, there was someone sentenced to prison for publishing tutorials to use how to use Bitcoin to master vision for funds. So it's been going on for a while. This example I just used to kind of showcase that very often the crypto amounts that are fundraised through these QR codes online, it can be very small amounts. So sometimes, they might not get as much priority. But, as you can kind of see in this example here, an attack happened in Nice, France, very small amounts of money can also be used to make a high impact, quote unquote, high impact attack. Like in this one where this truck was rented for at least less than $80, and it ended up killing 87 people in a vehicle ramming attack. And fundraising $80 in crypto or other ways, it's a very feasible goal. Okay, that was some of the old examples. So a little bit more of what's happened lately, and including also some of the research, some of the papers. When I do like to, highlight sometimes a company's paper, but then to kind of be objective, I would like to then highlight not just one company, but a couple of companies, a couple of reports to showcase that we are, we don't have kind of any favoritism for any company from the UN Office of Counterterrorism. We just kind of try to look at who are doing what and what makes sense and what is good to flag when discussing. This one is Financial Action Task Force. This one isn't really that controversial, where it's FATF, and I just want to flag this very quickly because it's very recent. This report was published mere a couple of weeks ago. It's called Crowdfunding for Terrorism Financing, and it does have a lot of interesting material on virtual assets. As you can see here, it's noted as a main method here, interaction of crowdfunding virtual assets. Has some specific guidance for law enforcement as well. Here they also flag how multiple digital platforms can be used, and that it's split across multiple digital platforms, which is kind of similar to the Sri Lanka case in that, it can be complicated when you have different digital platforms and different countries working together and how to track that. And of course, also further guidance. This is for the private sector. Here again, they're highlighting things that are relevant from the cases we saw. For example, small amounts of money. Noting the Nice case where, even though it's a small amount of money, it can still be a pretty high impact attack. And so it is important to be vigilant. Some guidance in the report for civil society as well. Here it's, when we're talking about nonprofits in general, sometimes I think in some of our trainings, there can be a bit of an impression that there's a little bit of a black and white kind of impression of NPOs, that, there's certain nonprofits that are good and certain that are bad, and that's kind of what's it. While in reality, it can be a bit more gray than that. For example, there can be a legitimate NPO, nonprofit, that maybe just has some people in it who are figuring out some ways to, like they say here, skim the funds raised, and then making it off with a certain amount of money while the nonprofit continues to exist. So there's some good guidance there for civil society as well, and also furthermore for policymakers. And you do see here they highlight human rights due diligence, reports of public-private information sharings, and also in the crowdfunding ecosystem, virtual assets gets highlighted again. And we also see here the importance of us to stay in dialogue with public sector officials, open communication, ongoing, and which is also why I'm happy that we have here private sector officials with us as well. We're also going to be speaking tomorrow. And that's something that we have really have tried to include in most of our trainings, that we have some private sector perspectives, and we do kind of take note that the private sector is sitting on a lot of good knowledge, a lot of expertise. A lot of the innovation development is coming in blockchain analytical space is coming from the private sector, and that is good to keep in mind that we are benefiting from including them in our trainings with public sector. Just a shameless plug here that we also have an online e-learning platform where we're developing our own our own e-learning. This is under development for now. There's a new IMF book as well with concerns of crypto. It's available online for free. It's pretty comprehensive. I would recommend taking a look at it if you have the time. And then I'm just going to go quickly through this case here because this is still under investigation, but it's just a very interesting case. It's not terrorism, this is crime, but it is just a very interesting way to see that there's always something new type of schemes going on that you know, at least I wouldn't have guessed that this was possible, but apparently this has been going, allegedly, going on for a while where a gang in Sweden is basically paying cryptocurrencies to pay for fake streams to launder money through that way, which they in addition do to pay for streams for artists that they themselves support. So they kind of get to both launder money and then also support artists that they are somehow have some type of relationship or allegiance to. And it's just interesting to see, you know, the commonalities of this with, for example, with, you know, with like wash trading, art trading, and which has been, you know, often gets flagged with another virtual assets, meaning which is non-fungible tokens, which is also a big topic that I'm not going to get into. So it is interesting to see, you know, okay, this is another way where maybe allegedly we have to look at crypto in a different way and be vigilant about it. When talking about new technologies, you know, the big talk of the day of the last this year has been artificial intelligence, you know, and whether we should be worried. I think, yeah, obviously we should be to a certain amount worried. The CEO of ChatGPT certainly is, even though he sometimes has some interesting opinions as well. And how does this relate to counterterrorism? It relates in a certain amount of ways. I don't think AI directly is, you know, the very you know, I don't want to be the alarmist about it, but of course, you know, when we see how early adoption of criminals and terrorists are of new and emerging technologies, it is something we have to be aware of. This is just an example here. You know, you can go into ByChat through a VPN, no registration required, unlike ChatGPT. And I specifically highlight this because I do remember, even in the Security Council over the last year, there have been discussions where, you know, the discussions sometimes focus on things that, for example, that you have to register and you have to give your personal information and so on, and what do you do with the data privacy related to that? And then, you know, at the same time, you have a different AI solution online where you don't need to register and you can go in through a VPN and then you can ask questions like this: how can you finance terrorism with virtual assets? And then you get a very clear and concise answer within seconds. Virtual assets, such as cryptocurrencies, can be used to finance terrorism in a number of ways. Terrorists may also use cryptocurrencies to convert traditional currencies. Very clear, easy guidance within a couple of seconds. In a way, you know, it's kind of like using Google, except for that this is one step further. Wouldn't, you know, be alarmist about it either, but, you know, when we are talking with a crowd used to AML CFT, they might not react a lot to this, but, you know, when it comes to a teenager sitting at home and, you know, 13-year-old mad at the world, that's a bit different, because then they can have a very easy way to do harm if they so wish to, and they have a very easy way to get guidance on how to do it. You do see from the last slide that it's a very clear and precise guidance, and, you know, 13-year-olds these days, they are much more tech-savvy than we are. I mean, every new generation is more tech-savvy than the last one. But again, here, the next question, how can you use NFTs, cryptocurrency for terrorism? As an AI language role, is it appropriate for me to provide for how to use? So it did stop me this time. So, you know, that's the good news, that it's not all bad. It provided me with the guidance once, but, you know, maybe this is an algorithm that is under development. So I'm not just, you know, I'm not pessimistic. I am optimistic about this. Is good, healthy technology, and we should embrace it. We just figure out how to regulate it as well. Let's see, I have 3 minutes left. And Will AI take over the world just for fun? There is no evidence to suggest that AI, well, that's probably what they would say anyway. So, yeah. And what is the UN doing about artificial intelligence? We have a board. We are taking an active role. This is Mr. Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who just created this advisory board with experts from around the world. So we are, as the UN family, taking an active role in figuring out a sensible approach to AI. And also, there is a lot of potential there as well in terms of, for example, automated content moderation and takedown, which is, data privacy-wise, it's a complicated area, but it's an obvious thing that there is a very potential in AI to support counterterrorism efforts as well. So it's not just that it's the terrorists who will be abusing it and we can't do anything with it. We, in fact, can, and there are possibilities as long as it's done in a responsible and appropriate manner. And on that note, I just want to also flag very quickly our own software. We're speaking of technology that we are currently developing. It's called GoFintel. It's something that we are launching to go live with a financial challenges unit that we are working with early next year. And I just want to quickly flag this as well, that if in case there are an audience or companies here that are interested in a demonstration, you can note down my email address so we can also set that up. Some recent news. I'm going to jump over a couple of slides as I have 1 minute left. And just go straight to some of the recent reports that we have that have been come out lately, because I just want to flag on the how quickly the dynamic use of crypto is in the space where from talking about Bitcoin for a long time. We were also talking about privacy coins like Zcash, Monero a lot over the last couple of years. And it's interesting to see how quickly we have now moved on, where more and more of the reports from private sectors, companies such as Elliptic, are highlighting Tether, USDT, stablecoin, as the one to look out for now, which did surprise me, but it is several companies who have flagged this lately. This is also a recent update from TRM Labs. Also, using USDT on Tron. This is an example from Indonesia, using this a lot more. So it is really important to stay on top of this and follow the trends and to keep training going, because the development is so quick that even for us who are working a lot with crypto, it does surprise us. I don't have any kind of clear answer as to why this stablecoin or USDT has become suddenly so popular, but looks like a lot of terror groups around the world, for now at least, are prioritizing using this. And lastly, I'm only 1 minute over, I just want to flag that this is another private sector company chain analysis report. And this report is kind of, I don't completely agree with all the indicators they use, but I do understand that the aim of the report is to want to highlight the countries where average everyday people are embracing crypto the most. And the thing that I just find very interesting when you look at the top 20 here is that, it's not like you have a range of, all the Latin American countries or African countries, Asian countries together. You do see kind of the range here of how this is spread out and where crypto is happening. Just another illustration for me and for us that, to work with crypto from the international way to cooperate and coordinate is very, very vital. And with that, and only 2 minutes over my time, I'm going to thank you all for staying with me after lunch, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.
We extend our thanks to Mr. Kamal for the valuable time and information, and for not taking much time. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the session today and hope you achieved your desired outcome for attending this workshop. With this, we end today's session. Feel free to network with our experts today, and we shall resume with the rest of the session tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Thank you.